don't have to spend all the money. I don't spend all the money, but this is a figure that works well for our department.
How about vehicles? Are you all set for?
Talk about the cruiser that we've spec'd out for next year when we do the capital part, if you'd like. But I'll answer any other questions anybody might have. Happy to answer any questions about operation of the police department. We're a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week service. There's always somebody on duty. We don't have any slack time with no coverage at all. Being able to work with Rockport has been a fantastic venture because I don't have single officers responding to domestic disputes. When our Rockport officer heads to the hospital, we start a unit from Camden. I won't go into details, but right now I have the ability to work 24-hour-a-day coverage at the hospital because they need it. I've had to tap resources from Rockland and Knox because of the training schedule we have, but still man coverage. And when somebody goes down with the flu and working in close quarters, those are the things that we really have to pay attention to now.
Yeah, speaking of the flu,
Yeah.
the COVID-19
Yeah.
virus, are you guys planning for that, and how?
We are. Universal precautions is what our officers are taking. I've talked to the supervisors tonight about making sure our cruisers are cleaned out every night, sanitized. As far as plans for things that we are doing, we are working with the local churches to get names of people who might need to be checked on a regular basis, and they are going to, and Audra can probably talk to that a little better than I can because she had talked with them today. But we are willing, we already do the Good Morning Camden Rockport calls where we call those people who don't have somebody who regularly checks on them. Jeff Sukeforth does that every morning. He has about a dozen people that he calls. We are willing to ramp that up to call as many people that need to be or want to be called.
Protection for yourselves?
Yep. We have our personal protective equipment in our cars. We take universal precautions anyway because we are exposed to blood, body fluids, and things like that all the time. So, doesn't mean that we are invincible and can escape it. If it happens, we are going to have to deal with it. I have talked to the other chiefs and the sheriff in Knox County. We've put a plan together that if one of our agencies goes down and they need coverage, we are in the middle of putting together a countywide mutual aid agreement to cover just incidents like that. We have a great working relationship with those other agencies, and we have to look out for each other when somebody needs coverage.
Any other questions?
I have a couple of questions. How do the number of officers in Camden compare to the number in Rockport?
Well, we're twice the population, or under twice the population in Camden. Rockport has 5 officers in full staff. Camden has 11, including me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And what do you consider the most time consuming? Would you say it's drugs?
people calling about other people, posting stuff about them on Facebook takes up a lot of it seems that people don't settle things the way they used to. Technology, we get calls all the time about erratic operation, very legitimate calls. Sometimes it's a case of somebody passed me and I'm mad, so I'm going to call. We do a lot of those. We do a lot of community stuff. We do property checks. But the one driving thing, our domestics are, we are very fortunate that our crime rate is low. When people call and ask me about moving to Camden, I say Camden and Rockport are still the places that you could probably leave your keys in the car 99 nights out of 100, but that 100th night might be the one that gets you, so I don't suggest doing it. Mental health and the lack of facilities for people that need treatment is really taking a lot of our time up now. I can tell you stories of people who can't be placed that are stuck in the emergency room for days on end. There's just not the services out there. So we've become crisis workers, tongue-in-cheek with that, because the crisis workers do a very good job. All of our staff in both departments is trained in advanced training with dealing with mental health issues. That is taking a lot of our time up. Our burglaries are, we get a few every year. It's pretty much a general bunch of everything we deal with. Then we deal with every type of incident you can imagine. My detective sergeant sitting behind you does all of the major cases for both departments, and he keeps a caseload. He's never without things to do. He does a lot with the schools. He handles pretty much every case that, major case that happens in any of the school in this district. So he stays busy.
The high school?
We do. I use him because I don't have a detective in Rockport, and my feeling is that those are students from Camden, Rockport area, and I'll get something else out of Rockport to cover for that. And being able to share those resources has worked out very well for us. And those are cases that somebody with professional knowledge and taking the time and putting on, because you're dealing with juveniles, you're dealing with confidentiality issues, so you need somebody with that expertise that can do those.
Any other budget-related questions, Tyler?
Is there going to be any modification to parking stuff? I know you guys have talked a lot of parking downtown, and I know it's a fairly big loss. You know, we don't make as much revenue as we spend doing it.
If you saw what Bar Harbor made in 5.5 months,
So
Yeah.
I just don't know if that's going to affect any of this budget or if that's future.
I'd say that that's something that if the town wants to move forward with it, it probably wouldn't be in this budget cycle.
Okay.
I mean, it would be wonderful if we could, because a lot of revenue potential.
Yeah, it's just, it's always amazes me when you look at how much we make off tickets versus how much we spend to write tickets, and
it was never designed to be self-supporting.
Right.
I understand that when you look at that, you say, well, that ought to be doing that, but
it's not as true intent.
if
I
you
realize
don't,
that, yeah.
if you don't get that turnover in parking during the summer,
It has collateral
it
impact.
sure does.
Oh, and another important point, so the police department has some offsetting revenues. The most significant is the reimbursement that we get from Rockport for 40% of Randy's time.
Anything else, budget-related questions?
What other sharing do you have with Rockport? Or how do you work that out with the detective?
What's that now?
How do you work with Rockport with sharing the detective?
Well, like I said, we use Kurt on cases that are of a major type event, so, you know, sometimes I'll bring some coverage over. If, I don't bill out every hour, because it would be a nightmare to keep track of. But say we've got an officer that needs to go to court, and I can say, I'll ask the Rockport officer if they can cover for a few hours, vice versa.
That works fine.
It's worked out beautiful.
Okay.
You know, major things, like if we have an overtime shift, if we have an overtime shift in each department, you know, I won't bill that out because we'll just flip that. But if we have to cover for 3 or 4 nights in Rockport, we'll bill that out. And they do the same thing if they come over and cover over here.
Okay.
Carla?
The relationship has worked well. You're pleased with the,
I'm very pleased with it. It worked out well. I mean, I was lucky. I was a kid that grew up I was born and raised here, and I grew up in Rockport, so I knew a lot of the people. Rockport is near and dear to me because it gave me a great place to grow up. But Camden has been my home for the police department for 31 years, going on 32, and both communities are very near and dear to me. So I was very fortunate when they asked me, and I will continue to do it as, I mean, I'm going to have to retire at some point, but I'm not thinking about it for another, you know, I'm 50, I'll be 52 at the end of the month, and I plan on being here another 10 or 15 years unless they wheel me out for some reason.
Carla?
Yeah, I had a couple questions about a few of the line items. It looks like the health insurance percentage of total wages is quite a bit higher than for like the administration department. Is that, it's the same plan? Is that because people are taking more family plans?
I will let Jody answer that.
So you're comparing administration to police department?
Yeah.
Okay.
It looks like about over 40%. Health insurance is over 40% of the wages,
Yeah.
and it's like in the high 30s for
Right, it's actually the plans that are selected by each individual, and like you said, if it's a family plan versus a single plan, it's obviously, it's a whole lot more expensive. So we have, all 10 officers, I think, have the insurance plan, and the majority of them have family.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
All right, I just wanted to make sure. All right. I have two other questions, that's okay. So there are two items where you're asking for quite a bit more money in FY '21 versus the actual FY '19, and I was just wondering what the FY '20 actuals are looking like, and that's in the area of training and professional development and vehicle repairs.
I don't have where we are right now with the vehicle repairs. That's a roll of the dice. Sometimes we have major things that go wrong with our vehicles, so we spend more in a year's time. I can tell you with vehicles, when I took over as chief, we were getting 2 years out of our vehicles, and the price of vehicles has gone up considerably, so now we're getting 4 upwards to 5 years out of a vehicle. So we maintain our vehicles well. We have to make sure they have good brakes on them, good tires. Some years we don't have a lot, some years we do. It was last year, I had to do the whole top end of one of the cruisers in the engine compartment. That gets quite costly. I just had the same thing happen to one of the Ford SUVs. That one was covered under warranty. So, training and development, training and professional development. It depends on what we can get for free training, as opposed to any officer, regular patrol officer who has over 5 years post-academy, I start training them as supervisors, because when you start training line officers with some experience as supervisors, they start to think like supervisors, they start to act like supervisors. Reduces liability for the police department, but that training is not cheap. It's probably $1,000 to $1,200 per class by the time you pay for the lodging and whatnot. But I've started that as a career opportunity. It makes officers want to stay around who've had some time. It's great quality training. And we in policing, as probably a lot of places have done, have promoted people to supervisory positions that had no supervisory training. I think it's a better idea to train them first and have them ready at the drop of a hat to walk into a supervisory position. That's why some years I do more of that. Some years I don't have people that are at that point in their career that I will invest that. I want to have 5 years of a commitment. When they make the 5-year period, they have to have 5 years to post for a patrol sergeant's position. So if we can get them trained up, then right now I'll have 2 that'll have 0 experience, so there'll be a time. But if we wanted to send somebody to, say, the FBI National Academy, that's big money as well. The training is free, but the cost of getting them there and whatnot, so.
And the EMT training comes out of which budget line item?
So that was sort of a combination of, we had reimbursement from FEMA for the storm from 2 years ago. So it was a free training up to a certain point. And so anybody who wasn't covered by the grant that we got to do that training through the Department of Labor was covered by that FEMA reimbursement.
Okay.
And just back on the training, a lot of times I won't spend that money until this time of year because the training doesn't come out until this time of year. So
Okay.
once the classes start rolling out, and we have to get their applications in and get them approved for it, so.
Randy, what's been the reason for turnovers over the years? Is there any one area that stands out?
A lot of younger people don't look at one agency as a career agency anymore. They like the variety. There is so much opportunity out there. If you go somewhere and you don't like a decision that somebody makes, the next place is ready to hire you. I can't compete with the sheriff's departments because the first thing they give an officer when they go to work is a car to drive. And it's a take-home car, and they get to use it whenever they want. That's great.
Is that where you're losing officers?
I keep losing. Tim Carroll and I and Chris Young, we all have a good relationship, but be honest, we all steal from each other. If somebody's got a good employee, I'm quite flattered that we train our people so well that they are very marketable to other places. I hate losing them, but we do get reimbursed, though. If we send an officer to the police academy for 18 weeks, for the next 5 years, there is a $40,000 fee that the other agency has to pay if they leave and go to that
So there's
department.
okay.
So we do get a return on our investment to a point. It reduces like $8,000 a year, I think, but it just went up to 40. But departments are paying that. In Southern Maine, they have signing bonuses for anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000, and they can't get enough people to apply. The amount of people that are retiring out of agencies, like, say, big agencies like the state police, there's a lot. There's not a lot of applicants. Watch the news any night. A lot of people don't want to get into police work anymore. Those of us that have stuck it out, we just do it because probably we don't know anything better to do. But there's a lot of variables. There's just so much opportunity out there, and everybody's looking. I think every department in the state. We've been very fortunate using the parking enforcement officer's position to bring somebody in. We get to train them up some, and then we move them up into patrol, and that's worked very well for us. So maybe we'll continue to do that.
Hey, anything else on the budget or a motion? One more question, Carla?
Sorry. Not sorry, actually, I'm doing my job. I don't want to overlook that there are two budget areas where you actually are asking for significantly less money than you have spent in the past. And I want to make sure that you're covered. And that was in the area of radios and small department equipment.
Sure. Let me address the radios. What's going to happen at some point is every agency, including police departments, fire departments, emergency services, rescue, are all going to have to go to digital radios. That is to reduce the bandwidth, so more radios can be put on. I think I'm telling you that right. So what we did was we bought all new dual band portables last year. So we can talk analog, but if they were to make the switch tomorrow, we could go to digital as well. So we've been replacing those radios. And when I buy a new cruiser, I put a new radio in that's dual band radio as well. So I was able to reduce that because we've got our radios back up in pretty good. This question came up at the Rockport Budget Committee meeting, and I talked to the new director of the communications department. And it doesn't appear that there is a plan in place to go to digital service anytime before July of 2022. The thing is when we do it, everybody in the county has to do it at the same time, including all your small fire departments out in Washington, outlying areas. It's a major expense. The radios, the portables are about $600 a piece. The mobiles, it depends what you get. But you also have to buy licensing for those when you go to digital service. So right now, I'm comfortable with reducing that because we have upgraded our radios, and those radios will be good for 4 to 5 years. So I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with with what I've put forward, and if it doesn't, if I need money in one section, we save it in another. That's the way you have to do it. My ambition every year is to make sure that we're in the black at the end of the year, and for going on 10 years now, it's always come out in the black, so.
We appreciate that.
I'm a taxpayer too, not here.
John, did you have a question?
I thought the county switched to digital 5-6 years ago. That was a big plan for the new
It's been a
towers.
plan
I
forever,
know, and
but
then
it
the
has,
new consoles, and
it has not
they
gone,
needed our repeater, remember, all that?
it has not gone into effect, and I can't give you a date when that's going to
So
happen.
the county commissioners are spending that money wisely.
The
I'm-
equipment that was purchased was all digital compatible, so it's all ready to be switched over when it needs to
But
happen.
that was the big thing they were saying 5 or 6 years ago.
Oh, it's been forever.
I know.
I think what's going to have to happen is, and Chris can correct me if I'm wrong, it's the federal government's going to have to come in at some point and say, by this date, you will be. And it'll be another unfunded mandate that.
Well,
we'll
state
have to-
police is digital, right?
They are, but we can't talk to the state police on their radios because we're all still on the analog system. The only way to do it, and they've gone back to putting, I've been told, I haven't verified this, that some of them have 2 radios in their car
And
now.
I thought you got a grant for radios about 5 years ago, to
That
do
was
all
for,
the,
that was for portables.
yes, to go digital.
Yeah, no, that was just to replace the portables. We went in the county grant. You're dating yourself now.
I know.
They last about 5 years. They're out in all types of weather, and they get, they're on their gun belts, so it's in and out of the car, and they get banged around, but we've had good service.
We still got eyewitness and everything, whatever it is now.
Still got video systems. I actually acquired a couple of those brand new at no cost to the town, so I'm ready to, when I need to install one, I have one in reserve.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I suppose we're gonna give it money, don't we?
I'll make a motion that we approve the budget as presented for the police department.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, the
you.
motion carries.
So you want me to talk about the cruisers?
Yes, please.
All right, I do have a request in the budget this year to replace one of our SUVs. Last year, it was time to replace the cruiser that I'm issued. It's an administrative car, so it does not require that I have all of the same equipment. At that time, there was a desire of the select board for me to look into hybrid vehicles. So what I ended up buying was a Ford Fusion Responder Hybrid. It's a pursuit-rated hybrid vehicle. It's a 4-cylinder gas-electric hybrid. I'll be honest, when they said, look at hybrids, I was thinking, you're crazy. It's not going to be a very good police car. I got to say, I'm quite impressed with it. It's a great administrative car. It would be great for a detective's car. It does not have the room in the trunk for everything that we need to put in that vehicle. It does not have enough room to put a vehicle partition that we also need in our patrol cars. I have spec'd out a Ford Interceptor, which is the SUV, in a hybrid. There is a design change in that model for 2021, so a lot of the equipment in my old SUV that I have, which is going on 4.5 years, is not going to be transferable. The hybrid alone is about $37,000. It's probably going to be another $10,000, $11,000 to set it up. So we're up to requested $48,000. I just talked with a chief in Southern Maine who has put one of those on the road, who has a plan to go with all hybrid SUVs at some point. And he also has longer range plans that all of his detective cars will be plug-in hybrid, gas-electric hybrids, which is something that down the road we
Portland,
can.
South Portland, didn't they?
That was
They just
Feldman.
switched over. I just saw it on the.
We carry a lot of gear, and I know that there'll probably be a desire that we buy a police car like mine, because I've had great luck with mine. Mine is not an all-wheel drive, it is a front-wheel drive. I'm the only one basically that drives it, so I can get here and there, and I drive up over Moody Mountain every day on my commute. It's gone well for me. It does not go anywhere near as well as an all-wheel drive vehicle does. The trunk space is very limited because the battery pack is in the back there, and I have some fairly tall officers who wouldn't be able to put the seat back far enough to put a cage in it. So that's why I'm going. We've had good luck with our Ford Interceptor SUVs in the past, and I'd like to continue with that, but also put it into the hybrid. The best fuel mileage I've gotten out of the cruiser that's assigned to me was 42 miles a gallon, up from 20 from my Chevy Impala. I put 4 snow tires on it this winter, and with winter driving and idling, I'm down to probably anywhere between 33.3 to, on a good day when it's warm, I'll get 34.5. And I expect as it warms up, that'll go back up. The thing about the hybrid that's very impressive, our cruisers have to idle a long time during the winter when it's cold, and in the summer when it's hot, because of all the equipment we have in it. We need to keep them charged up, and it also gets hot in there. Our computers won't work, so sometimes you have to leave the air conditioning on. With the hybrid, if you leave it running for 2 hours, it actually only runs about 22 minutes out of that 2 hours, because the engine cycles on and off. I think this is the direction that the board would like to see me go. I can put us into a Dodge Charger, but they're not hybrids. They do come with a 6-cylinder now, but I think I'd like to keep going on this road, because I think we eventually are going to see, yes, there is that initial cost up front, but I think you're going to see it over the lifespan of the vehicle. If we were trading these out every 2 years, you know, I would be looking at some other option. But now that we get 4.5 to 5 years out of them, I think it's the way to go.
So I was gonna ask you, what are you doing for mileage now for 5 years?
I just talked with Dan before I came in, and we'll be at about 110,000 with the vehicle that I'm going to take off the road. A trade vehicle, I've got an old Dodge Charger. It's really not worth a lot, so there's not a big trade value. The SUV that I'm going to replace will go into a secondary role because it's all equipped so I can use it for animal control. We can put dogs in it because it's partitioned well. So there'll still be a use, so we'll be getting another couple of years out of that as well. I know that the price is up there, but
On a new vehicle, do you get the same manufacturer's warranty on a police cruiser?
actually, I think the Dodges, I'd have to go back and look, Mark, but some of them will give you the 100,000-mile major components. One of my other SUVs that had to have a water pump and all that was covered, and that's got 80,000 miles on it. So that bumper to bumper, everything is not, but major components
They
are.
treat it as a commercial vehicle.
They do.
Right.
And they are built better. They are pursuit rated. It's very important that our cruisers are set up similar, so when you jump in from one to the other, you're not having to wonder where everything is set up. I know I've had questions, well, why can't you have an officer use this one that doesn't have a cage? You only need to be kicked in the head once driving down the road without a cage to realize how nice that cage is. And I don't expect officers to put themselves at risk by not having vehicles properly set up. Coronavirus. We are exposed to bodily fluids. I've been spit on. I've been kicked in cars that didn't have cages. I'm very pro-cage, and I don't expect those officers to have nothing but the most safest vehicle set up properly so we can have our equipment where it's supposed to be. And now that we are going to be responding to emergency calls as EMTs, there will be extra gear. I won't go into everything we carry in the back of our cars, but we have spike mats to stop pursuits. We have AEDs, we have first aid bags, we have spare tires, we have shovels, we have tape, we have crime scene processing stuff. It takes a lot of room. We can't put that in the back seat because we transport prisoners in there. So that extra room is needed. We'd never be able to do it with a smaller vehicle. So that is my recommendation, and I stand by it.
Everybody know we're on tab 9, page 37 is, you want to see where the cruiser is.
Are we voting on last night?
No, you don't need to vote on that tonight.
Okay, thank you. That it?
Any questions on it? John, you and I go back way back. You take it easy on me. Thank you very much. I do appreciate your time and consideration of our budget and my 10 years as police chief. Yes, sir.
Robin, can I have a
Sorry.
mic? I just want to say a few things. I guess I don't need a mic. As a town, I have to say this, we're so fortunate to have the chief here. He does an exceptional job. I've worked with the LA County Sheriff's Department for 31 years, actually going on 33. And so I have a little bit of knowledge about how wonderful this department is. And one of the reasons we have a full staff is because of the benefits in the chief and how well the department is run. You know, he said a little bit about how hard it is to get people, but there are departments that are down, major departments in big cities, they're down 1,000 deputies, 1,000 police officers. We're in really good condition. And one other thing I wanted to mention, the reason we've asked him to go for hybrid vehicles is because we were the first town in Maine to join the Global Covenant of Mayors. And saving energy is a major concern of the select board, and hopefully most of and everyone in town. And he's, like he said, he was willing to explore, and he asked me when he wasn't quite sure if they would perform as they do. So I'm real happy to see how well the sedan he got last year is working. And we are so well equipped and so well planned out, and we're really fortunate. I'd like to thank him for all the years of service.
Thank you, Mark. I'll give you your $20 afterwards. I just,
Well, my $20,
I couldn't do my job if it wasn't for the incredible staff that I have that gives their all every day when they come into work. And we're very fortunate to have them. And we've got some, Kurt's been with me for what, 22, 23? Mike Gary's been, my lieutenant has been with me for 30 years. And we've got a lot of people who've been here a long time. So I'm happy to run the ship, but I can't run it without every one of them. And with the help of Rockport, and that's become a great thing. And I think we would go backwards if we did anything different at this point. So
Thank you.
I don't want to take up everybody else's time because I
Thank you.
can't wait to see Dave get up here.
We have one more.
You're going to get your chance. Thank you.
Okay, next is County Dispatch, page 13.
So for dispatch services, we pay a fee to the county who runs a regional communication center. And so the $160,237 is Camden's portion of the overall cost of dispatch. And if you look, there's a breakdown of what the county assesses to each municipality in Knox County for that service.
Our version's a little small.
Yeah. So if you get your magnifying glasses out, you can have a look at everybody else's share. So the 5.2%, and the fire chief can speak more to this than I can because he sits on the board that oversees the communication center, but a lot of that would be salaries and benefits. They've had an exceptionally difficult time recruiting people for the jobs in the dispatch center. So I think that they've had to do a lot of work to try and make sure that they have the personnel that they need to effectively run that service.
Still evaluation plus service, number of calls.
I believe, is that the formula?
has not changed.
So they were talking about going to strictly calls at one time. Not yet.
So what is the formula?
Valuation and number of calls.
Oh, okay.
What's the typical number of calls for a year for Camden?
Everybody.
It's hard to say because it's police,
Sure.
EMS, fire, all combined.
We can get that.
I mean, we know that number for EMS very well, but,
We had 6,300 incidents drawn for the police department.
and for EMS, it's like 1,200.
1,200 fire departments, 340. Those are just 911 calls. That doesn't account for just admin calls that
Yeah.
take place in Rockland. But we could get those numbers if you like.
It's just interesting to look at how much you pay per
Probably
call.
written in here, but you can't read it.
Yeah, so it's all right, it's all right in the table,
Small
right?
print. Okay, any other questions, or do we have a motion? There's not much we can do about that amount anyway, right? So we need a new motion, please.
Make a motion that we accept it as presented.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Thank you, no one opposed? Okay, fire and rescue, page 14,
Yes, so
Chief Farley.
I'd like to invite the fire chief up. So for this budget, there is a bit of a discrepancy between what the fire chief, it appears as if the fire chief has proposed and what I've put in my recommendation, and that's largely due to the fire chief had projected a $20,000 increase in the on-call payroll budget to account for the fact that when we have fire department staff trained up as first responders, they're likely going to be responding to a lot more calls. And I wanted to show that in the actual EMS budget. So it still is in the overall budget. It just isn't sitting in the fire department's budget. So really that's the main discrepancy between what Chief Farley has proposed and what I've proposed. There's some small differences between his as well. A notable one is small department equipment. He proposed 9, I did 7, and I based that on, sort of actuals and what's been spent in the past few years. And Other than that, it's fairly consistent. You know, it's really, the change comes down to, like we said before, salaries and or wages and benefits.
Any questions?
That's
Any
pretty accurate.
comments?
That's a pretty accurate summary.
Same basic question I asked Randy, how are you set for personnel? Are you at full?
Did he pay you?
I'm not talking a volunteer, but yeah, I understand that everybody is missing, so. Yeah.
We are authorized to have 4 full-time employees, which we have, for myself and 3 others. In terms of our part-time on-call firefighters, those headlines definitely apply. John can tell you stories when he served in the fire department that the fire department is authorized to have 65 part-time on-call firefighters. We have 15.
15.
We lost about 10 over the course of the last year, primarily because they've gone on to career departments or they've moved out of town for employment. I have 2 that enlisted in the Army, and I have 1 who's going to be leaving within 3 weeks to join the Air Force. And those 3 particular gentlemen who are now going to be in the armed forces, that were very solid, reliable young people, and their loss is felt significantly. We've done many things to recruit over the years. It's just the reality of what the face of what this community is now, and people just are not lining up to join organizations like the fire department like they used to be.
That's kind of why I asked the question.
Tuesday night, we had a fire alarm at the Mainstay Inn at 5:20 in the afternoon, and I was actually homesick. I got up because there were 2 other firefighters that responded to the call, the one who was on duty and 1 gentleman who's going to be going to the Air Force in 3 weeks. That's what we deal with. And that's not just us. It's all of our mutual aid partners. Every time there's a fire in Rockland, we are on the road to go to Rockland. Lincolnville just asked us a couple weeks ago to respond to their calls during the daytime, just simple fire alarm calls.
Okay. I asked that question knowing that you were going to, it is a dire situation at the moment.
It is, yes.
So
Can't downplay that any more than that. So that's an accurate statement.
Everybody's tried everything to try to bring folks in. A lot of it's a family makeup, just changed from the 20 years ago. Working environments changed. I mean, when I started, Knox Woolen Mill was full blown, and when the fire went off, 7 minutes, 3 trucks were gone.
Correct.
Not, whole different time.
Different time.
But also, when you were a fireman, then they gave you a set of rubber boots, a helmet, and a thing, and said you're a fireman. Now you got a lot of training, a lot of everything go along now too.
Educated much more rigidly, and protective equipment is much more thorough and complete than it used to be.
And that's a lot of it too, for the volunteers, to get the time off from their families and work to be able to do the training.
Is there any program with the high school for getting youth interested in?
So we typically go to the high school 3 or 4 times a year. We get with one of the main outdoor education classes and do a mini physical agility course with them, talk about things with them. Typically we'll go and hang out in the lunchroom several times a year. We have got some interest from students over the years doing that, as has Rockport. We attempted a number of times to get into the homeroom program at the high school, work with the guidance counselor, but it just has not come to fruition yet, not because of a lack of effort on our part. There is a firefighter and EMT training program at the Midco School of Technology, so they are able to educate students, and they are able to come out of those programs certified in the end.
And how many are coming out?
They typically have 10, 12 students in the classes per year.
Do you see in the future that we will need a full-time fire department. And how many would you need full-time to man the needs of Camden or for the area?
Rockland has a crew of 5 on during the day.
And that's
And
24
the
hours a
chief,
day?
24 hours a day. So they do a 5-person crew, so that's staffing the ambulances, that's staffing the fire trucks.
Do you see that
Do
happen?
I see that happening in Camden?
Yes.
I'm going to, the answer is yes, but it would make much more sense to me if it was a collaboration of communities, not just,
So working with Camden, Rockport, Rockland, Lincolnville, maybe?
I think, in the future, and we've talked about this a lot, it's going to come down to the R word that no one wants to talk about, which
I
is
know.
regionalizing
I know.
services.
Are we 5 years away, 10 years away? What's going to force the issue?
Mine is 5 years away.
I was going to say.
It's 5 years away every year.
I think it looks more promising in the stuff that we're trying to kind of start working towards with EMS, I think is going to be a big step in that direction. But I don't know how many years.
I mean, what's going to force the issue of regionalization? I mean, nobody wants to,
I think it's going to be when every single department is
it's short, they don't have the
short.
staff.
Yeah, because, there's some departments like Rockport, just the way that department is, the makeup of the community, they've managed to, they have a lot of volunteers, a lot of people who are self-employed or have that flexibility to be able to participate at a pretty high and consistent level. And they're kind of a bit of an anomaly in that way. But, if you look at sort of the demographic, that's going to change within a few years as well, so.
Because of age.
Yeah.
right, Chief Peasley predicts within 5 years, that's going to change for Rockport.
Hey, Chris.
And I hate to, we're on this like doomsayer path, but what drives something like that is something like happened in Farmington. An event like that happens in Farmington, when it happens in your community, that's when it will change. And those changes are happening, those conversations are happening in Farmington now in terms of what are we doing together? Yes.
Chris, how many departments respond when a call, how many cities respond, towns respond when a call goes out?
For any building fire that we get notified of here in Camden, it's Camden, Rockport, Lincolnville, and Hope. It's the same for those communities as well.
Mark?
With the way the police department is working and Randy's doing double duty, has there been any discussion about your working with Rockport in a similar capacity? Not necessarily you personally, but the department's working with a swapping system. Has that been brought up at all?
So I think as Audra said, the EMS is going to drive that a little bit more. We do train regularly, put it on our schedule to train regularly with the other communities.
As far as equipment is concerned, are you cross-training on equipment and stuff with the other departments? Looks like Randy said you get into a vehicle, you walk up and, the switches are in different places. If you're not from that department, you don't know how to use that piece of equipment. Is that
That's all part of training, and Randy can buy a Dodge, Chevy, or a Ford. The issue with fire trucks is there's so many different manufacturers and different way communities choose which ones they're going to get. Do we try and standardize it? Absolutely. Yeah, it only makes sense. We purchase pretty much the same kind of air packs. We purchase the same thermal imaging cameras. We try and buy as many things that are the same from town to town as we can. And that's probably improving significantly in the last 4 or 5 years.
Good. Tyler?
As you guys have taken on more planning and code stuff, have you done any budget transfer with that department, or that's just been sucked up as far as?
There's been no.
All of Clint's training and stuff was just part of your training budget?
all the code enforcement training that the 4 full-time people did was, yes. Either we had some grant money that we got, or it was paid for from the fire department's
Okay.
budget.
What percentage of your time is doing that work now that didn't exist before?
I'd say maybe 20%. It was a little bit higher. It's probably dropped off a little bit with Steve here, because I think Steve is able to manage the load a little bit better. But Steve's also been very helpful in educating the 4 of us and getting us more ingrained into what he's actually doing.
So there's a note in your training and professional development line item here in the notes section that says that you're paying for the code enforcement training.
Oh,
And I
thanks.
had a question of why isn't that in the code budget? Why is it in your budget? In the write-up here, the supporting write-up, it says that you're paying for it.
The intent of that, when we did it too, is to give you more authority with your life safety inspections, which you need to be code certified, so it worked out for benefit for the.
Oh, I think it's a great idea.
No, I
I'm just
know, but
wondering why
that's
we're
your
paying for it
benefits.
here and not paying for it in code enforcement.
So some of that was, like, we did a certified fire inspectors class, which is a National Fire Protection Association program. Not necessarily a code enforcement program, but a life safety code program.
Okay.
Because in addition to some of the work that we do with the code enforcement officer, we, for all the bed and breakfasts, the lodging facilities, the restaurants, we go and do life safety code inspections for them. So that's a little bit different than the code enforcement.
Okay.
Building, or in terms of like building inspection, electrical inspections, the life safety is a little bit more.
Lisa?
Chris, I noticed in FY19 you had a pretty big chunk for personal protective equipment. Can you remind me what that was for? And then this year, I see you're asking for 12, but Audra's recommending 10. What were your plans for that, and are you okay with the 10 instead of 12?
Yeah, we're okay with the 10. What we did was, last year, we had our typical replacement plan to replace PPE, and then we had the opportunity to purchase more sets of it. And the primary reason for that is rates of cancer in firefighters are significantly higher than the general population, and there's the new PPE that we purchased has carcinogen blockers in it. So we were able to get that for most of our active.
Thank you. I remember you talking on it last year, but I couldn't remember what it was, what the details were. Thank you.
Okay, anything else or a motion?
I move we approve the town manager's recommendation.
Second.
For 556600.
Yes, ma'am.
Seconded? You seconded? Okay, all in favor? Okay, anyone opposed? No? Okay, motion carries 556600.
Probably should give them more money, so we can-
And Public safety building.
So,
Yeah.
So the public safety budget, that's really for all of the upkeep associated with the public safety building, which houses both the police and fire department. And there's a little discrepancy between the department head's budget and mine, and that really has to do with the custodial staff and the wages for that position. And other than that, there's little difference between what the department head has proposed and myself.
Is that because the custodial staff is shared between buildings?
Yes.
Yeah.
Where are we with the HVAC?
Oh, yes, so that, last year, I don't know if you all remember, there was, I believe it was at 35,000 that was budgeted for HVAC repairs in that building. And we were just about to sort of finalize that and move forward with it when we started looking more holistically at all the town buildings and energy efficiency upgrades. So what we're doing now is we're entering into a performance contract with Siemens, And they've done an assessment of this building, they've done the public safety building, Snow Bowl, they're going to do wastewater treatment plant, and then the public library, and look at across the board what kind of improvements can we do to those buildings that are going to yield long-term savings. And so that's kind of been rolled into this broader look at how do we make sure that when we're investing in upgrades, they're upgrades that are going to pay for themselves over time.
So when do you anticipate actually doing work on the building to fix the system?
When do you remember the time frame that we set
Well,
for
we have a
this?
meeting with them on the 26th to go with the initial kickoff project, and one of the first ones would be public safety. And I would guess, though, by the time they get past that point, when we approve it,
Yes.
it's going to probably be in early summer. That piece.
Yes.
And then you got to design it, go out to bid.
We've already kind of covered with Chris how the actual HVAC system in the public safety building, the cooling portion, doesn't work. It hasn't for 2 years. So that's kind of an easy replacement with newer, more efficient equipment. There'll be lower energy bills. But that's going to be one of the first ones following this summer.
That system has been effective for years.
Yeah, you're right.
Right, and as Bob said, we did work with a firm and have redesigned it and have a plan ready to go. Going through a process.
They kind of already had the design in hand.
Was that the one with the heat pumps? That I heard about?
It's similar, they're called VRS, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
called.
same idea.
Yeah.
So where's the funding for that study reflected, the cost for that?
So because it's a performance contract, the idea is that the cost of the project has to be offset with the long-term operational savings. So it's not anything that we're budgeting for because that's sort of the way that it's funded.
Okay.
So there's no upfront cost to do the engineering, and as the projects are proposed, they have to have, sort of an offsetting operational savings. So the idea is it doesn't have a budgetary impact. However, a little bit of that depends on, there could be projects that are sort of above and beyond, and they have such a great energy savings benefit and environmental benefit that the select board and then the budget committee may decide that they want to do them. But that's something that would come back in another financial year if that's the choice that they want to make with the overall project.
In a performance contract, the Siemens would guarantee the savings. So you're saving here, and you're paying that amount here.
So even though you have your savings over time, you still got your capital outlay to do the system to start with.
That's
So
correct.
that's gonna be budgeted.
So where's that?
In the first year.
No,
What do you mean, no? I mean, if it costs 40 grand to fix it, I don't know, just for a number,
You'll
you
pay-
gotta come up with 40 grand cash to pay for it.
over 15 years.
To Siemens?
Yep, up to Siemens.
So they're paying the capital costs of putting in the system?
No, we would, but it's like, okay, so it's like with the LED streetlight project where, so that project's $160,000, but it has a payback period of like 4.5
I
years.
understand that, you're saving money over time, but you still have to come up with the money to put it in, the original cost, putting the money. I mean, you gotta put in the system down there.
Yeah, the Siemens will. And
So you're paying them a yearly, whatever it's gonna be, whatever the contract works
Based on
out.
the guaranteed savings. Which is guaranteed.
Be interested in that kind of.
Okay, any other budgetary questions or motions?
As presented, accepted as presented.
The town managers?
That's $46,185.
What do
Yes?
you do about the custodian now? Shared with this building, or?
Yes.
And then the public bathrooms down there too, or?
The public bathrooms, that's Parks and Rec,
Okay.
their custodian.
Still there for the-
Yep, they still do that, but we share Andrew now with the public safety building as well.
Andrew who?
Mark.
Comment on that. Parks and Rec tends to do the bathrooms at the public landing. Are they also going in and cleaning the one in the office down there? In your office? Are they coming in and cleaning your bathroom there? Who? Is Parks and Rec
No.
people coming in? Because that doesn't make sense.
No, that's the custodian in this
Custodian
building.
From this building.
Oh, from this building.
And then the other guy, Parks Rec, does the Lake Beach bathrooms?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for $46,185.
Second.
All seconded, all in favor? No one opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay. Hydrant assessment.
Yes, the hydrant assessment. So this is a figure given to us by Maine Water every year. And they set the rate, and it provides capacity to all the hydrants in town. And there was a slight decrease over what was budgeted in FY '20.
Basically, it is what it is, you gotta just pay it.
Yes.
The motion we approve town manager's recommendation.
Second, that's for $262,000. Any other further discussion? All in favor? No one opposed? Okay, emergency medical services, page 18.
So perhaps out of all of the public safety budget areas, this is the one with the most significant change over FY '20, and also a real change in what's proposed in terms of service delivery. So as most of you in this room know, we have a contract with Northeast to provide ambulance services to the town, and that's shared amongst the 4 towns of Camden, Rockport, Hope, and Lincolnville. And our contract with Northeast has largely remained flat over last year. But one thing that the towns have been looking at are a first responder model, where town staff are trained, and this is what we were talking about before. We have a grant from the Department of Labor to train, I believe it's, how many are in the class?
There are
4 from the PD, I would say 12, 13 maybe.
Yeah, 12 to 13.
14?
14 including,
Oh,
15
I was
including
close.
Linda.
That's right.
Is that just Camden?
No.
The 14, or is that?
Yeah.
Camden, there's 14, and
Okay.
then we have Rockport,
Right.
and then a couple others.
So, yeah, 14 town staff from Camden, so that's, like we were saying, the 4 officers in the police department, the 4 full-time firefighters, 5, including the chief.
Yeah, 4 of us, right, and 5 part-time on-call firefighters.
And then Jody.
Jody.
And do we have any other
Linda.
We have a
patrol staff?
couple of.
Ski patrol.
Ski patrols. And.
Oh, yes.
Yep,
2 from Public Works. So they're all being trained to be first responders, and a lot of this came to just some concerns over our current system and a desire to have some sort of incremental improvement where some of our public safety staff could be there to answer calls in town right away, because I think there's a expectation that, you know, if firefighters or to some extent police show up at a call and somebody needs some basic medical assistance, that they're going to be able to help them. You know, a good example would be if somebody, you know, gets lost or injured in the state park, you know, the people who are going to show up to do that sort of rescue service are firefighters. And I think that there's a perception now that those firefighters are going to be trained to be able to do some level of, you know, medical assistance to somebody if they need it. And that's currently not the case. However, by taking this class, they'll be able to provide that.
And this is the $20,000 that you wanted in your budget that she wanted to put in this section of the budget. Is that correct? Yes.
You look like you have a question.
No, I'm shutting my mouth on this one. I'm just gonna let you go for it.
All right.
So is that grant revenue in the revenue line?
It is not. It is not, because it's, you know, it's going to be,
It's a wash this year.
Yeah.
And FY '20.
Was that part of matching grant, or did we had to, or was it a separate grant that didn't require a match?
We had 50% grant match for each person taking the class, except for Chris and myself. And then with the proceeds from the FEMA reimbursement, we were able to take care of the rest of it.
Now, going forward to next year, will there be similar continued training, or was this almost like a one-time thing?
They will have to recertify
Every 3 years.
every 3 years as EMTs.
And/or if we have additional people that wish to get the training. So there will be, or there may be
Something there.
continuing.
So this 20,000 is out of Chris's budget. It's a proportional amount, I assume, of the amount of time that they would be doing that. Why is it not also out of police and anybody else?
Well, that's why I wanted to put it in its own area, because it's covering, anybody who's going to be.
But it's covering all of them.
Well, we'll see the thing, not all of them, it's going
Okay.
to cover on-call people,
Oh, okay.
but if it's, town staff who are already, being paid as firefighters or police officers, that'll
Okay.
become part of their
Got it.
job.
So on call, help me out with that, what does that mean?
So that's, currently the fire department has on-call people, and that's where Chris was talking about, he's got 15 now. He used to have, or there used to be many, many more, but some of those people are being trained as EMTs. And so if they, get called out because there's somebody who needs a first responder, those on-call people who are trained as EMTs could respond.
So they get paid for the EMT services, got it, okay.
And, this isn't just, there's been an ongoing conversation about EMS. We've been meeting with folks at the hospital as well as Rockland, Camden, Rockport, Lincolnville, and Hope. We've been meeting monthly, as well as folks from Northeast. And we had tried to make the suggestion to Northeast about having first responders in the community, because there are times when they are busy or they don't have enough staff on their ambulances, and calls go out for help, and either nobody goes to them or their folks are waiting for an ambulance from Rockland. And so recently, last fall, the folks at Northeast finally said it would be beneficial to have people in the community trained as first responders. So that's why we kind of geared up to do this. We looked for the grant funding because we hadn't budgeted for it. So we looked for some funding to help pay for the education.
Mark?
First responder is not necessarily transport personnel, correct?
It does not mean that, right, but it doesn't mean that they couldn't go on the ambulance to the hospital.
They could, but it doesn't mean they have to be with an ambulance crew. They can be a police officer getting out of the vehicle or a town office employee showing up at the.
Correct.
It
To
doesn't
help,
mean that they are with an ambulance crew.
correct. To help provide patient care until an ambulance arrives.
The only one that has to stay if they're a medic, right? Then they have to go, if you're a medic level, then you stay with your patient.
This is going to require that the fire department get licensed through Maine EMS to be a first responder agency.
I gotta ask, I guess. I could. So where are you in this thing? I thought you were gonna have some numbers going forward for this budget year, but I see everybody voted to extend one more year. So do you anticipate having something presented to the people later this summer, early fall, so people can see this, get a better handle on what's gonna happen going forward? Because there's been a lot of conversation going on from everybody, but it's not been, I want to say productive 100% yet.
So one of the things that we're hoping to move forward with, and this is in partnership with the hospital and our neighboring communities, is doing a project to better understand what our needs are, what the capacity is, and also some public education and engagement around what EMS services are and what the desired level of service in the community is. Because I think it's really difficult to have a conversation about this unless everybody understands what it is we currently have, what the options are, and, understanding better what everybody wants and expects. So I think we need to do a lot of work on that even before we get to a point where we're throwing out different options for service models and costs associated with them.
I mean, I agree that the first responder thing is definitely a good way to go, because the police and firemen, they're there. I mean, they're the person who's on the call, and they can manage it until upper level people get there. But, I mean, first aid had, because it was a long run for them to go to Hope and go to Lincolnville. They had folks in Lincolnville that responded before the ambulance got there, it's the same thing. So, I mean, it's a very good idea, and I commend these guys for doing it, because it's a lot of work, and Jody, excuse me, and I'm glad you're all doing it. I see benefits for the community. But I also think that, this is my thing, I think that about time the county stepped up and got in the middle of this and had a regional ambulance
Is that our word?
with centralized thing. You could do so much, but that's just my idea.
Well, no, and I think that it's a great point, and it is something that's being talked about at the county level. They hosted a meeting where all the different EMS services kind of met and talked about their challenges, and what everybody really has acknowledged is that all sharing the same staff. You have per diem people who've stitched together a career by working for a number of different agencies in the county, and you know, it looks like some services are doing a lot better than others, but really it's a matter of, 3 to 4 people going somewhere else or not being available before you have problems across the entire county. So I think with that acknowledgement, everybody wants to start working together to share resources better across boundaries, and I think that's sort of a minor thing. I mean, it's not going to solve the bigger problems that we're all facing, but just that acknowledgement that we're sharing human resources and we have the opportunity to share resources in terms of equipment is kind of the first step in actually being able to work together to provide seamless coverage across the county, because when there's an issue here, it impacts everyone, because say our provider is gone doing a transport and it has to pull resources from Rockland, that puts pressure on St. George, South Thomaston to provide backup to Rockland. So it has this knock-on effect that can be felt throughout the county. And I think that everybody's really starting to understand the mechanics of how that works and how they need to better manage personnel and other resources to make sure that we're covering the needs more broadly. Because, we're in a sort of a unique and unfortunate position where we're a little too far away from service centers. Like Rockland is sort of the only game in town when it comes to like a fully professional EMS fire service, and they really are designed to meet their needs pretty specifically. So it's not like we're a small community with an Augusta, a Bangor, a Portland nearby that can provide that coverage to us. We really do need to work together with our neighbors closely. So the county does understand that, and they do want to play a larger role in sort of facilitating those discussions.
It's great to hear.
Good. Yet to be determined what actually happens moving forward, but there are some good conversations going on at the very least.
Good. Okay, any other specific questions, Mark?
No, I'd just like to make a motion that we approve the town manager's request.
It's for $178,530. Seconded. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor? No one opposed? So $178,530. And it looks like, streetlights.
The Emergency
No,
Operations
did I-
Center, that's a little tiny.
Oh, sorry,
That's all right.
excuse me.
It's okay.
Did you want to touch it?
It's often overlooked.
I
It's
noticed
okay.
you were still sitting there. I thought I must be missing something. Emergency Operations Center.
So, do you want to talk?
Yeah, the Emergency Operations Center is basically our little command center when events happen that we need to get town staff together. It's currently located in the basement of the Congregational Church. We run drills out of there in preparation for, like, the town owns a bunch of high hazard dams, the east and west dams, the Seabright Dam. We do winter weather events, run little drills.
Well, we should tell them that the fire station's in a flood zone, that's why we have to move out.
That's a good point.
Yes.
Yeah. Make a motion, we approve it.
Second.
Any other further discussion?
Gonna build a new one.
All in favor?
In the middle school.
Oh, that's a good idea. No one opposed, so $500.
Passes. Robin?
Yes.
I have to make one comment?
Yes.
This is
I need a
slightly-
mirror. One of those.
One of the things that John was talking about is maybe having the county talk about EMS services. I'm the chair of the EMS committee for the 4 towns, Camden, Rockport, Hope, and Lincolnville. And one of the reasons we've been having those discussions, because sometimes there are problems having private ambulance doing private business and they're not available for us. But if we were to have, for instance, an ambulance located here in Camden as one of the locations of county service, hopefully those people that are there on staff would also be doubly trained as firefighters as well, which would help the manpower situation that Chris is suffering through. So it's a long-term conversation about not just EMS, but also fire as well, and making both situations a better circumstance.
Thank you.
Robin,
Yes.
on that point, the general public, especially those that come from away, when there's an accident and an ambulance shows up, a police officer shows up, a fire department person shows up, they assume, right, wrong, or indifferent, that they have all the skills that they need to save the day. And I know that different people are trained differently. And our personnel here may not be like the training of somebody in downtown Los Angeles. So that perception, is that something that you guys have run into? Am I barking up a dead tree here, or am I?
Well, you're not barking up a dead tree. You're completely accurate, but we're all in that education process now, and by the middle of June, we're going to be able to fulfill that expectation. Somebody fell out in front of Fringe and Braun the other day, and they said, take them over to the fire station. Well, if they brought them over to the fire station right now, we'd stand there and look at them and wait until an ambulance showed up. In the middle of June, that's not going to be the case. They're going to get some services.
Good.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Just if you'd like to talk about the capital.
Oh, okay.
There's a fire truck pump repair on
Page
page 37.
36, tab 9. Probably page 37, is it? 37. Bottom.
Towards the bottom. So we have a fleet of apparatus. We have 0 room on the apparatus bay right now. So if we were to have an ambulance in there, we would need to create some space. The simplest way to do that is to reduce the fleet, which we have a plan to do. But in order to reduce the fleet, we got to maintain what's there. And Engine 5 is a 1997 truck. It's going out in a couple weeks to have some corrosion repair work done, and next year it needs to have some pump work done to maintain the pump and its working capacity so it meets insurance service ratings. So rather than coming and sitting in front of you to ask for $650,000 to buy a brand new truck, we're asking for $20,000 to fix a pump and have the truck last another 10 years.
That's listed under capital improvement, correct? Okay.
Is money well spent?
Yes. Is that just for that one specific thing, or is that under the actual capital reserves that we saw in this thing that you passed out earlier, we asked about last week? Isn't there a line in there for
Fire truck replacement.
fire truck replacement? That's a totally separate entity. Okay.
I don't think there's anything budgeted for fire truck replacement.
Not this year.
There's a capital reserve that we
There's
keep,
a capital
that we keep
reserve fund.
putting a little into.
Putting money into
Like 80 some odd thousand, if I remember correctly, when I looked at it earlier.
25.
No, it's
5,000,
25.
okay.
And that pump repair would be expected to last another 10 years.
Yes.
So moved.
Yes.
As presented.
So moved. Second?
Second.
Seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? No one opposed? Okay. 20
feel bad, we didn't vote on his car.
25.
It's all together at the end, right?
Yeah.
We're not voting on his individual.
Well,
That didn't really count. It was more.
For you. If you are down manpower by so much, do you anticipate having to add another paid full-time person next year and the coming years? I know that kind of, it wasn't brought up a little bit, but just seems like, you know, if there's a fire at my house, I'd want to make sure our services are staffed properly. So just your opinion on, if you can't get more volunteers, what's going to happen?
So it kind of goes to Sandy's question of how many people do you need? I mean, that's a valid question. Adding one more person doesn't necessarily solve too much of a problem.
Okay.
Doing something collaboratively and having cross-trained people to do both fire and EMS is
That helps.
a better solution.
If that regional kind of pooling of resources does not happen and gets put off year after year, do you foresee needing to add staff members with, like, very soon, like within next year?
To maintain my mental health, yes.
So likely there could be an increase if that does not move forward, like in your personnel budget.
And one more comment, about 3 years ago, we did go from 3 to 4 full-time fire people. And at that time, it was a really important need for him to be able to staff the staffing that he needed. So that made the big difference. But now we have to look at the bigger problem.
And
Yeah.
when would you make that call? Like when?
To add,
This is already FY '21, right?
it
So
is.
you're looking at being pretty shorthanded next year unless something regional happens. And if you lose any more volunteers, what happens?
we,
Do you see
Yeah.
us adding more full-time people before regionalization comes into play?
That's all.
Are you going to have
Really good
to
question.
react and
Yeah.
add full-time staff to man Camden before we can get all the other towns involved?
I mean, I'd say now we rely very heavily on our mutual aid partners, especially when there's a fire. And that is working out for now, because like we said, we have some departments that are able to recruit volunteers for whatever, reason in their community. So I think that even though, and we have, the city of Rockland, which has a professional, fire EMS service. So I think as it is now, we've got something that is not completely broken and unworkable. But this is why we really need to start looking seriously about, EMS and what we're in.
Maybe you and Chief should explain what mutual aid is so we understand better about the cooperation amongst the communities, which is, I think, the point you're making about helping. I'm not sure if everybody understands what that mutual aid really is.
Yeah, so does everybody in the room understand the concept of mutual aid? And, there's a fire and fire departments in Hope, Lincolnville, Rockport, Rockland are called out as well.
right, the Knox County Mutual Aid Association started back in the mid-1950s. And it's been since before I came here, so I don't know, 15 or 20 years that Camden has had it set up. If there's a building fire in Camden, it's an automatic. I don't request it, it just happens. Camden, Rockport, Lincolnville, Hope respond to that address together.
Originally, it was a specific building had a truck respond from each community originally, back in the day.
And 10 years ago, I probably, if there was a fire on Main Street, I would have had more firefighters than I knew what to do with. Today, I would probably have somewhere in the ballpark of 15 to 20 from the 4 towns.
So, yeah, I
And
would,
the
So putting
national-
all your eggs in one basket, hoping for this regional thing to push through, it's not a definite, and you don't know the timeline. What do you need?
I'd
benefit
say
to plan
that
for another.
with the broader conversations around Knox County, that is definitely not a definite nothing that we should be planning our futures around. However, I do think the
Hydrovacs.
4-town, what we do with EMS services and how that can interact with the fire services, that's something that we have a little bit more immediate control over, and that's something that we're definitely working on now. And I do think that everybody has to be prepared for FY22 when we come before you and there is a definite difference and inevitable increase in budget for that.
Right.
Right.
I guess even with that additional support, would that cover your staffing needs for FY '21?
You know, a lot of it, different communities have different expectations, so it's getting communities to kind of align their expectations and be able to support the services that we all want to
Right.
support together. That's part of the challenge. To me, I mean, I've been saying for decades that each individual community can't continue to support its own public safety agencies. It's just too expensive, and it's much more effective to do it collaboratively. I try to avoid the R word.
Just the cost of equipment alone is scary.
And that's why we're trying to reduce our fleet, rather than trying to, Rockport's in a position where they have to rebuild the fire station in West Rockport in order to fit apparatus and potentially ambulances in there. We're looking at reducing our fleet. We don't have as many people. Let's reduce the fleet. Let's create more space in the building that way. And let's focus on 2 or 3 apparatus that we can operate and maintain effectively with the people that we have, and not have all the other periphery pieces of apparatus.
So if the regional thing does not come together in the next financial year, are you comfortable with your personnel situation and your number of volunteers?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
But again, I'm not the only person in that boat. Union has a fire. They have 7 towns coming. It's the same thing with Hope. It's the same thing with Lincolnville. It's just at what point do the communities all get to that point where they say, yeah, okay, we need to do something together. And I think with the larger conversations that we're having, with the hospital being involved, with Rockland sitting at the table, and we're able to see the bigger picture and not just how it's just affecting me and my address where I live.
Yeah.
We're able
But
to see that.
Should
we're able.
anything happen, we're on the back foot then in the next financial year because we're understaffed. Right.
True.
But there's nothing that we can do here tonight to increase your personnel.
Not unless you increase his budget by $100,000.
Yeah.
Probably more than that, frankly, because one person's not going to make a difference.
Right. One person's not going to make a difference, and
You're talking about shifts, putting together a man shift with 3 to 5 people per shift. 3 different shifts.
Are you covering 24 hours now?
oh yes.
So on the mutual aid, say you get a call here in Camden, and what if it's just a very small fire that Camden can take care of? Does everybody else still show up? So you go to the fire first, and then you call.
No. I don't go. If the caller is on 911 and they're telling the person taking the call in Rockland, I have a fire in my building, that's 4 towns are going to that call.
That is. Okay.
4 towns are going. If I get there and it's a rag on the floor and we don't need the resources of Lincolnville, Rockport, and Hope, then we turn them around. But if we need them, they're on the way.
The other day, I was heading to Rockland, and I passed the Rockland fire truck coming our way. And in a matter of 2 minutes, he was coming back, because obviously he'd gotten a call that he wasn't needed. But they were on the way.
We were on our way to Rockland this morning and got turned around.
Okay, I'm going to suggest that we move
Streetlights.
on to streetlights.
All right, so for those
Or
of
we
you
could be here all night.
So for
I
those of
appreciate
you
your
who-
concern, though. Thank you.
It's good to know the complete picture and how you're actually feeling as someone who is responding to these emergencies and feeling like you're not supported or have your complete resources to do the job correctly.
I feel supported, don't.
Yeah, but
I think the manager and the select board and you guys all support,
Employment-wise,
but,
yeah.
I mean, people, everybody needs people. I'm hopeful that the bigger picture will play out.
Barbara Streisand sang that, didn't she? People.
You're aging us. I'm not sitting next to you anymore.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, so for streetlights, for those of you who remember, last year, one of the capital improvements was a project to purchase all the streetlights in town from the utility and then convert them over to LEDs. So we're in the middle of that process. We've purchased all the streetlights from CMP, and it's anticipated that this summer will be the actual replacement of all the fixtures, and the LED fixtures will go in. So the difference that you're seeing in FY21 over 20 is accounting for the savings. A lot of that is electricity, but some of it is also, or the majority of the savings is not paying the lease fee to Central Maine Power anymore for our streetlights. The maintenance line is increasing because, of course, now that we own the streetlights, we're going to have to perform maintenance on them. We have a contract, or we're going to have an agreement with a local electrician to do that, who's located right in Camden and has all the equipment. So we're going to have a much better level of service than the days when a street light was out and we called CMP, and then 3 weeks later we'd get a call and it wasn't replaced. So we're very, very happy about that. In the CIP budget, so if you go to tab 9, there was about $20,000 that we needed after the investment grade audit was completed, and we got the final acquisition numbers back from CMP, and also found that we needed, there wasn't an allowance for some grounding and wiring work that's likely to be needed. It's about a 20 grand difference between what was budgeted in FY20 and what the project's going to end up costing. So I've requested an additional 20,000 in the capital improvement plan, just to cover any overages in the street light replacement project. So that's really the big differences and what's needed from FY20 to FY21.
Make a motion, we accept the town manager's request.
I have a question first. Are these just the pretty streetlights in town, or are they streetlights all over town?
So these are only the ones that are all over town. The pretty streetlights were replaced in FY18, I believe, or
Right.
FY18 budget.
Okay, so this is the whole town.
This is the whole town.
Excellent.
Okay, we have a motion for 15,000. We can go back to discussion in a second. Why don't we complete the motion? Or do you?
I didn't make the motion.
No, Mark did.
Second.
You did second. I'm sorry. I thought you were asking another question. I'm sorry. Okay, seconded. So further discussion, question?
I see a note in here about the globe lights in front of the post office. Has there been conversations about the couple lights that were in front of Rite Aid as well?
I believe those are owned by Rite Aid.
Oh, yeah, I think they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are the ones in front of the post office town-owned? Or are they post office owned?
Post
I would think post office.
office.
They're ours?
They're not ours.
They're not ours.
It's more an aesthetic thing.
Right.
Downtown design committee one.
Yeah, consistency.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I was kind of mentioning those other two as well. I don't know if they're actually still operating.
Yeah, and I mean, it's pretty minor, so, I think after the fact, we could figure out a way to fund that if we can work with Rite Aid.
Okay, thanks.
So on the maintenance line here, there's a $10,000 budget for the maintenance. These are going to be all brand new lights. Is
Yes.
there any warranty that comes with them? Or
Yes.
Why would we need maintenance?
I think I just want to be prepared in case there are some, unforeseen issues, with any of the new lights that, isn't covered by warranty or whatever the case may be.
What do they need to do to ground it? What's the difference, the old system to the new?
Well, so this is the electrician who, is going to do the conversion. We also, because they're local, we asked them to repair some of the lights as soon as we assumed ownership from CMP. And so when they went around and did some of the repairs, they noted that there were some grounding and wiring issues on those lights that were likely going to cause a problem during the conversion. And so that's why we're looking for additional funds for that. And I don't know exactly what the issues are, because I'm not.
Well, we're not the only ones. I heard the other towns.
Oh, yeah.
That same grounding issue.
Yeah, and I guess, we're kind of fortunate because CMP, their lights were in a little bit better condition than like in Bar Harbor that's covered by Emera. theirs were in really poor condition. So it's a pretty, I think it was all up, the grounding and wiring was about $7,000, and
Not crackle pot.
so of that 20,000, that's what can be accounted for in terms of grounding and wiring.
Any other
So our
questions?
savings here are about $48,000 in electricity.
So
And leasing.
it's
That's the
more,
lease.
it's not, yeah, it's more of the lease than the actual electricity, but there is savings in electricity as well.
I had a question about, I've just heard, about the concept of like light pollution, too much light, and has that, you guys all talked about that at a select board level, or is that?
So that was talked a lot by the Energy Committee. So they wanted to look at only having streetlights at intersections, and I don't even know if they were proposing them on some of the main corridors. But when we started kind of planning this project, we thought, well, we're never going to get this done if we have to come up with a whole redesign of where the lights are going to go. But with these new lights, there's smart controls on them, so we have the ability to dim them, which is great. Now they're on, that's it. They can be programmed so that they dim during different times of the year when,
Great.
yeah, so I think and there could be neighborhoods where they decide they want them completely shut off.
They don't track the moths and things
Yep.
like that. Yeah.
So, it's just going to give us a lot more control over the network and what we do with it, and energy savings and how we set them so that they're used more efficiently.
That's been policy for the intersections for 20 years, but.
So only put streetlights
Yeah,
at
and
intersections.
And,
Some of that's required by federal government and DOT.
well, when the town voted on that 15, 20 years ago, the only places that had a number of lights was Main Street, Elm Street, and I believe Pearl Street. The rest of it, and a little bit of Mechanic. The rest of them, all intersections should be, pretty much, and maybe one here and there, still left over.
Yeah, but just to give you an example, when there's one neighborhood, when they found out we were doing this project, and we said, well, we're going to have to make a decision as to whether or not we replace them all or just at intersections. And they were very upset at the idea of not having streetlights all along their street. Then I've heard from other neighborhoods who have said, yeah, we don't want them. If you put that, like, people are going to be ready with their slingshots if you put that light
The
back
other
up.
thing too, that brought up, the light pollution was a big deal. That's why we went to the intersections to eliminate a lot of these lights. We just left them in high traffic areas like Main Street. Stuff like that.
So we're not changing it, it's going to be a like-for-like replacement right now.
Was it 155 lights, something like that?
No, we're 300.
300?
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion for $15,100, the town manager's. Any further questions? All in favor? No one opposed? Motion carries. Tab 5.
We've been nice to everybody, now we can be hard on somebody.
So for the Public Works budget, so this is going to, Dave St. Laurent is our Public Works Director. This is his first year with the town of Camden. And he's going to do a presentation to go over both the operational budget and a lot of the capital improvements that are being proposed. And Dave's kind of like the major content area for that. It's going to take a lot of consideration by all of you. So we thought that him doing a presentation and kind of explaining his operational budget and some of the capital improvements and what's happened in the past and how that's kind of fed into what's being proposed for this year, as well as some of the issues that we need to start planning for in the future, was really worthy of a, kind of a more organized and bigger discussion amongst all of you. So I'm going to give it to Dave so he can present.
Good evening, everyone.
Microphone. Thanks, Robin. You don't have to speak right into it, but.
So my name's Dave St. Laurent, and I've been with the town for 6 months now. And I just want to say it's been a great job so far, and I want to thank the people I've been working with and making me feel welcome, and the community as well. I hope you don't mind this presentation. I figured a lot of you, I'm sure, know a lot of the details of how the Public Works Department works, but I'm sure that there's some that don't, and my objective here was to put this together, which hopefully will answer a lot of your questions and probably give you a better visual idea of some of the projects we're working on and some of the things that we plan to do. So, over here. No, that's not what we want. Sorry about this. What do you want? Presentation to do?
If you want. Should just go into slideshow here.
Yeah, I think we can see it.
Oh, okay, great. That's what I wanted, actually. Okay, so this is the, let me see, I'm not at the beginning here. There we go. So this presentation is broken down into the following sections. It's kind of a department overview, review of the road work completed in 2020, Public Works budget changes. So at that time, I'll kind of just highlight the things that changed in the actual budget from last year to this year. It's a map of the state roads and the ranking system that they use, so it gives everybody kind of an overview of what our streets are versus the state roads, which a lot of people sometimes don't always know. The road surface management system map, which is a ranking of all of the roads that we're responsible for. We do inventories on all those roads and we give them a ranking, and then the system helps us with budgeting and different treatment types for the roads. The planned surface resurfacing for FY21, some partial sidewalk improvements, some sidewalk pave-arounds that were talked about, planned road infrastructure improvements, and that's kind of more of a complete street overview, and some CIPs. So I'll start.
What's CIPs?
Capital Improvement Plan.
Thanks.
So this is the general department overview, what Public Works is responsible for. We do snow and ice control for all the roads and sidewalks. We take care of the public trash cans and public spaces as well as the municipal buildings. We're responsible for the road and sidewalk maintenance, shouldering, ditching, paving, sweeping, and brush and tree removal. The stormwater system maintenance, that's structure repair, culvert replacement for the stormwater around town. Town vehicle equipment, fuel depot maintenance and repair, and we also assist other departments like the harbor, town hall, and snow bowl. The department's responsible for the maintenance of 160 roads. That equates to 58 centerline miles, 148 roads, and 33 miles are town-owned, 12 roads and 20 miles are state-owned. The department is also responsible for about 12 and a half miles of sidewalk. This is a quick review of what was done in 2020. So we paved Marine Ave, Norman Vega, Cobb Road from Mechanic Street to Cobb Hill, Ames Terrace, Rawson, and Willow. Several larger surface patches you've probably seen were done on Mechanic Street, and there was some drainage improvements done on Willow, Cobb, Jim Brown Lane, Goodwin, Linden, and Maple. Several manhole stormwater structures were also repaired, and 220 feet of culvert were replaced, 4,100 feet of maintenance ditching was also done. We worked on the construction and assembly of 35 window inserts in Town Hall, and which assisted with heating conservation. And Public Works also built and installed the new storm door insert vestibule in the French conference room. And then we re-roofed the lean-to attached to the sand and salt building for storage of our equipment. So this is the budget, the Public Works budget, and these are just the changes. So in that first part of the budget,
If you go to your budget now, you'll see, if you have any questions on the budget itself and why those changes occurred, I've made quick notes on the side for myself to explain those, and I can explain any questions that maybe somebody has about the budget itself. It's really, for the most part, the budget stayed the same, and then there's several changes. You can see that are presented here. A lot of them are the wages, and insurance and benefits, travel stipend, there was a sign change, and that's due to replacing the two entrance to Camden signs on Route 1. So that was the reason for the increase of that. Gas, diesel, and oil, I think that was just a price adjustment based on the current costs. Professional development was one we didn't have, and we used to have a lot of free training through Maine Local Roads. There's currently a training course that's being put together from Maine Local Roads and the state, and it's more of a leadership course for some of the crew, and I want to send a couple of the crew to that. The other one would be winter sand and salt. That's more just an adjustment due to the more of an average of the past 3 years. Radios, 6 of the trucks. When I first started, I had all the trucks and radios checked because a lot of them weren't working. And 6 of the trucks are no longer compliant with the 2012 narrowband requirements. And this budget has a schedule of replacing 3 of them, and then next year I'd put in another 3.
Question on your radios. Are they, and do they have to be compliant with what Randy and Chris have for their departments? Is there any overlap there?
I don't really know for sure if there needs to be overlap with the police and fire department. I just know that we need to be able to communicate with ourselves. And talking to the radio company, I don't know a lot about the narrowband requirement, but I do know that they're no longer compliant, is what he told us. So,
if he wants to talk to us, if we go to digital service, he'll have to have digital radio.
We're getting our radios from the same vendor.
Okay.
For $1,200, why not just do all 6?
I was trying to be frugal.
Yeah, but wouldn't it make sense to do all 6 and then everybody is?
It would. I was just trying to plan it out over the next 2 years. I figured it would be a little less to the blow to the budget in the first year. But if you're willing to put all 6 in, we can make that adjustment.
Well, it makes sense though.
I think so. I personally think having all those radios, working properly there's a great benefit to that.
The new guy, huh?
New guy always gets extra.
You got yours when you were a new guy. I remember.
So Dave, that line item would go from 1,200 to 24?
Yes, I second it.
Well, thank you. Building maintenance, you see there's a decrease in building maintenance. There was the roofing that I had talked about earlier that we had done in last year's fiscal year was the reason why that line was a little higher. That's been taken down just to kind of cover potential costs for heating, any kind of repairs to the building, overhead doors, that kind of thing. So if you don't have any questions, I'll move on to the next section. So this is the next section of the budget, which is dealing with stormwater, trash removal, rental equipment, and engineering. Those are their changes to that next section. So there's a decrease. So this is tied into the CIP. So when I get into the CIP, you'll kind of see the explanation for it. But this line, I'm asking in the CIP to purchase an excavator. Right now, we currently rent an excavator for about 6 months. The total cost of that is about $15,000, and that cost was put into, part of it, $5,000 was put into storm sewer, and $10,000 of it, roughly $10,000 of it was put into rental equipment. So you see those two have decreased by those numbers. And those two numbers reduction will pay for the purchase of that piece of equipment.
You have enough work for the excavator year round?
I believe we do. And I'll get into that a little bit more when you see what I'm going to be trying to achieve this year. And a lot of it is road work and construction and ditching and that kind of thing. And it's probably beneficial for us to have that. And we're trying to do it along with the wastewater department, and they'll be paying for half, and we'll be paying for half, and we'll be helping them with some of their work that they sub out. So that's kind of the objective there.
Does anybody else have any questions on that? So trash disposal, there's been an incremental increase in trash over the past 5 years, and this is just accounting for that. There's currently things that are being charged at the transfer station, like brush and several other items that weren't charged for normally, and that's added an increase in that line. And then you can see that engineering has dropped, and I'll get into that into the CIP. The reason for that is we're going to probably try and do a lot of the planning and engineering that normally would be found in this line item in a CIP for some larger projects. Okay. So this is really a good depiction of the state roads, and you can see that they're color coded. So you can see the red one is Route 1, blue is 52, 105 is green. I think John Street is green and Union is green. It depends on how you break them up. I mean, 105 has several names. But for the most part, this is how these are state roads, and this is the priority ranking system that they used. So red is a priority 1 road, which is Route 1, and what happens with the state is that's how they determine which road they're going to work on. So they'll work on a priority 1 road, and then, a priority 4 road, like John Street, won't get any work on it. So this is their ranking system, and this is why you see some of those other lower ranking roads not getting any work done with the situation financially that they're in. So this is important because when I move on into the presentation, I'm going to talk about some of the initiatives that we might need to do to try and get some of those roads that are low priority improved.
So you say by priority by like how important the road is.
They have their own ranking system, and that's what they use, and they rank it, and they give it a number ranking, and 1 and 2s get work, and 3s and 4s get little attention.
Are they still pushing for the towns to take them over?
We don't want to take them over, but...
I know we don't.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they were pretty big on that.
I'm sure they'd love for us to take one over.
Compact zone, they call it something.
Yeah, like Rockland has.
But you
Yeah.
can't take the red one over.
We don't want the red one.
That is bad.
That'd be a conflict of interest.
It's federal. The red one's federal.
Federal highway. Okay. So this is the road surface management system map. So when I first started, I drove around with Rick, and we just looked at all the roads. And they have their own kind of ranking system that you look at the different conditions of the road and you rank it, and you put it into the supercomputer, and it spits out this nice map that shows the different color variations in the condition of the road. And then what you do is you put the information into the system, your current cost for those repairs, and then it tells you how much it's going to cost to repair those roads and the different types of treatment that you can do. So, this is somewhat subjective. I'm sure there's people that see their road on here and goes, I think that's, that should be reconstruct, and, it's only a rehabilitate. But it's really a guide that we use. So what we did was we went and did this. We ranked all our roads. I ran the query. I had it spit out the roads that were in the worst condition. And then that helped me move forward with some of the other decisions for some of the roads that we plan on doing this year.
Can you just, I can't see it from here, well, it's probably my eyesight, but can you just read what those rankings are from top to bottom?
So the green is no maintenance, the light green is routine maintenance, the yellow is preventative, the orange is rehabilitate, and the red is reconstruct.
Thank you.
So it's really important to remember that you don't want to be in a cycle of reconstruct or rehabilitate. It's always less expensive to be doing routine, no maintenance, of course, and routine and preventative maintenance. So an example of that would be you pave the road, it's nice, it's only a year old, and 2 years later you start seeing some cracks in it. So immediately you really want to get out there and crack seal that, because the road is only as good as the integrity of keeping the water out and the sub-base being able to drain. So
Is there a timeline associated with it? For instance, I live on Mechanic Street, and it's got to reconstruct.
It does.
So does that mean we're going to reconstruct that in a period of time, or it means when we do repair work, there's a certain kind of repair work that we do?
It's both. So what that's telling me is that we've let that road go to a point where now we have to reconstruct it. And that's where we're at with that road. because it's fit, it's in the condition it's in. It's meeting all the requirements of a reconstruct. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and what we're going to do with Mechanic Street. I think everybody agrees Mechanic Street probably needs some work.
Except for Robin.
All except in front of my house.
So this is where I arrived at the plan resurfacing. So like I said earlier, it's better to, do some preventative maintenance on roads, but we're kind of in a cycle of kind of band-aiding some things right now and doing sections of the road along with doing major reconstruction at the same time. So this represents, for the most part, more of not a Band-Aid, but partial road repair. So Lime Rock from Chestnut to Bayview is a section that we plan on doing. Park Street from Mechanic to Elm. Cobb Street from the intersection of Washington Street on 105 to the intersection of Pleasant Ridge, and that'll be a chip seal. Chip seal is something you haven't seen a lot of probably, but I think in the Cobb Road and Melvin Heights and a couple of the other roads with hills, it's going to be a really cost-effective way to seal those roads up and give them some traction for the hills. And I think you'll find it's going to be a good addition to the treatment courses that we're using.
Does the chip tar, does that last as long as a regular road resurfacing?
Well, I mean, it all depends. You can't chip seal a road that's bad. It has to meet some requirements of having a good base. So if you go and chip seal a bad road, it's going to fall apart. Chip seal is just another technique to like I said, like the crack seal. And the best case scenario would be you repave these roads completely. You recycle the pavement into the sub base, you pave the road, and then 5 years later you chip seal it. So you kind of rejuvenate that asphalt and you seal it up. That would be the best case scenario. But that's being really ahead of the curve with keeping up on your roads. And Rick's done a great job with what he's done. I'm not going to knock Rick for 1 minute. He's done a good job. But there's a lot of roads and there's a lot of work to do.
Chip sealing, as a personal, I ride a bike a lot, road ride, and chip sealing is awful when you're a bike rider. I'm just saying. Throwing it out there.
It gives you a lot of good traction in the wintertime, though.
That's true.
Yeah. So it's just a proposal at this point. So Bayview, from Fry Street to Lime Rock, Penobscot Ave, from the intersection of Chestnut to Bayview, Chestnut Street from the intersection of Fry to Lime Rock, Greenfield to the town line, Melvin Heights, the intersection of Molyneux to the intersection of East Fork, Howe Hill, from House 81 to the town line, and Mechanic Street. So Mechanic Street, we're going to pave from Maine to Washington ourselves, and we're going to mill and fill that. And then we're working with the state on something called the piggyback program to do a light capital paving on that road. And what that is that's more of just a very thin base coat, and that'll smooth everything out, and it'll be curb to curb, and it'll look good, and it'll last about 3 years. And that's because that road's in such poor condition right now that we really can't wait any longer, and I don't think anybody really wants to wait any longer with the condition of the road that it's in. But we do need to do some major planning on that road, and this buys us time to do that. And I'll get into that part in the next slide. Slides down the road. So partial sidewalk improvements, much is the same what I talked about on the roads is happening with the sidewalks. Sidewalks, there's a lot of sidewalk work out there. This is more of just patching and fixing sections of sidewalk from Fry to Lime Rock, section right before you turn on to Knowlton Street on 105 is really bad. Want to fix that. Grove Street to the cemetery. Various section of Mechanic Street, the surface is uneven and needs to be straightened out. We're going to do that. And a section of Bayview from Fry to Lime Rock. Some of the larger projects of the sidewalks that we want to do this year is Park Street from Elm to Mechanic, and Park we also want to completely pave that on that same stretch. These next three things are not really things that are budgeted. They're just things that have been kind of kicked around, and we've had engineering done on it, and we have estimates, but they were never done for one reason or another. So if you look at Elm Street, from Park to the Stop and Go. I think that's been talked about quite a bit, but it was never done. We have a price on it. I just want to leave that in there because, maybe we can wrap that into something down the road that we're working on. But currently, there's no budget for that. Another one is the Quarry Hill to Hannaford. That's going to be bid out with the 105 Signed Rock project to Shirt Tail. So we don't know what those numbers are just yet. I don't have anything in this budget for that either. The Knowlton Street sidewalk, what we did was, the school's working on a bid for the school, and we asked them to wrap in these improvements to that. They're bidding that out. If they come within budget, they're going to pay for it. If not, then we would have the opportunity to pick up the difference. I'm guessing it's probably going to be over budget, and we probably have to pick up the difference. But I don't know that number yet, and I don't have that accounted for in this budget.
School budget will definitely be too low.
But these are all really important segments of sidewalk that need to be repaired, and something needs to be done about them. So pave-arounds, this is something that the Pathways Committee has identified as areas where, for ADA reasons, people in wheelchairs can't really get around on the sidewalk because the telephone pole is in the middle of the sidewalk, and then there's just grass on the side. And these were all the locations that they've identified that need pave-arounds. What we've done is they've identified all of them, but we've put in all of the abutting property owners. And what happens is if this property, if we don't have the right of way to do that pave around, we're going to have to contact these people and get construction and easements to do that. So we're going to work on those this year. I don't know how far on this list we're going to get, but we've identified them and we'll be working on them this year. We're going to do those ourselves.
So that goes around towards the grass or people's lawns or whatever?
Correct.
So that someone can get by?
Right. Very small amount, but enough for a wheelchair to get through, or someone on a motorized scooter or something.
Sidewalk plow, maybe?
Well, in the sidewalk plow, that's another important
I
one.
was taking a dig out of the
That would take care of it.
phone.
Okay, so these are projects that for the most part are ready to go. The first two have been bid, and we're getting ready to propose to award them to the select board. So Mechanic Street and Washington Street parking lots, Phase 1 and Phase 2. As long as the select board approves that, we'll be starting in April on that. Norwood Avenue, that consists of putting in some stormwater, repaving the whole road, and then doing the sewer and the water line. That also has been bid out, and we're going to be presenting that to select board for approval, and we'd start that in the beginning of June. We also plan on widening that a little bit and creating a wider shoulder. One strategy for creating more walkability in town communities, you don't always have to make it a sidewalk. You can actually make it a nice wide shoulder for them to walk on, and that's what we're doing here. We don't quite have enough room to put a whole sidewalk in and put curb in and all of that, but we do have enough room to widen the shoulder out, kind of move the road a little one side and give somebody a decent place to walk. The next one is Pearl Street, and that one is what we're trying to do with that one right now, and it's contingent on the approval of the two above, but we have unit prices that we got from the two projects. The two above were lump sum, but they gave their unit prices when they bid these jobs out, and the unit prices were pretty favorable other than maybe a couple components in there. So we back calculated out the cost to redo Pearl Street, and we've already budgeted roughly the same amount of money. So as long as the contractor, we're going to be meeting with them next week, wants to take on this project at their unit price costs, which may be favorable, we'll take on this project later in the year. So this would be more of a widening out the road, putting an esplanade down a section of it, and putting a nice walking path to the right of it, and it would really clean up the road, which is in pretty poor shape, as well as changing out the sewer line and water line.
What do you mean by esplanade?
It's just a nice grassy area. So are you...
If you saw High Street, And it has a little grassy section between the road.
Which
and the
nobody
sidewalk.
mows.
You're talking about doing that on Pearl Street?
Potentially. It's one of the, Pascal Ave is a good example of what something with this would look like.
Please don't.
Oh, you look nice.
It would look, I mean, we're going to be talking with everybody about it before we move forward with this. But it would, I think it would be a good addition to your road, but, you
I
know.
remember a few years ago when Phil Roberts ended up mowing that one on Route 1 by himself in uniform because of some bet.
No, Parker paid for him at a.
Oh, Parker paid for it as a donation thing. Yeah.
So it's just a concept right now. We would be reaching out to all the homeowners before we did this. But we do have a drawing of it, and I can review it with you anytime if you like and see what.
So the goal of this project, though, is to get up to John Street and then put a sidewalk on John Street?
Oh, no.
No.
Well, that was one of the things, that was actually identified in the safety pedestrian forum that we held recently with the Maine DOT. And that was one of the third or fourth items that people were talking about wanting.
You want to watch up there, there's kids that walk by.
That's what they said.
And
Yeah.
they take their life in their hands at times. It's bad.
We've heard that, and that came up at the meeting. So, okay, so now I'm getting into the CIP stuff. This is just the CIP form that we use, and it has all of the CIPs listed, but I'm just going to go through them. They're all on a slide individually. So, I'm sure you've seen this request before. This has been, I think, asked of the Budget Committee for several years now, and it's a plow truck to replace one of our aging plow trucks on our back routes, Barnestown, Gillette, Hosmer Pond, Howe Hill. It's a four-wheel drive truck, 36-pound weight class. I'm showing a Western Star in this picture, but that doesn't mean it's going to be that. It's going to be bid out. The truck we do have, for this route, we would keep as a backup, and we would retire or trade in the 2001 International 2554, which is rusted out and poor shape. So that's the first one. This is the excavator, which I had talked about, the cost of this would be split between the sewer department and Public Works Department.
Did you reference a wheeled excavator?
Well, we did, and I'm showing a rubber tracked one here. We're going to try out the wheeled one first, because there are some benefits to that, some drawbacks. The wheeled one would allow us to move around in the town without using a trailer. Like if there's a windstorm, we could just go out and there'll be a thumb on it, and we can just grab trees and move them out of the way. That'd be the benefit to it. The drawback is the whole thing kind of sits a little bit higher off the ground, and it's a little more difficult, or it's different for someone to ditch and do some of that work with it. And we want to try that first. And most of the equipment companies offer, free use of those if they think you're going to buy one, and any of the cost of the rental would go towards the purchase price. So that's what we would do if approved. So this is an interesting one here. This is East Bridge. We got a call from a fisherman while he was fishing there. A large piece of concrete fell from underneath the bridge and into the water. And I went and inspected it, and I brought a company that specializes in the repair of bridges for MDOT, and it's pretty apparent that it has spalling and efflorescence, and which is that white kind of crystallization that you see. What we want to do is, when this road was repaired initially, it should have had a membrane put underneath the asphalt. And what we're proposing to do is to mill off the asphalt on the top. A bitumen membrane would be put underneath, on top of the bridge, to prevent any water infiltration to get down into the concrete, which then would get down into the salts of the concrete, which causes the efflorescence and causes the rebar to spall and pop and rust. So that's the objective. And then they would go underneath, and they'll resurface all of that and coat it, and then there'll be a little bit of drainage work on the sides for stormwater, so it doesn't kind of just sit on top of the bridge.
So what's the anticipated life after that?
they wouldn't give me a 20-year guarantee, so I'm going to guess maybe 10, 15 years. But the issue with this is we can wait, but I think the longer you wait, the more expensive it's going to get to do the work.
This was done about 10 years ago, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah. But they didn't put the membrane in.
It was just the deck was done.
Yeah. This is the other one. You can see that cracking and... So this is another one of the CIPs that, this is more of a planning tool and more of a tool that people use online, contractors and the sort. And it also helps us for doing any kind of work in town. And it's, what we're proposing is to map the stormwater system so that we know where all of our stormwater lines are, all our stormwater structures are, and all our lines go. What it also does is it creates fields to input data, and once you have all of the locations established, the next phase would be to survey those elevations and find out where they are in relation to the topography, and then you set up form fields, and then you put in the type of pipe, the size of the catch basin, the depth to the invert of the pipe, the smoothness of the pipe, the length of the pipe. And then what happens is, and I wouldn't be doing the calculation, but we'd have an engineer calculate where we're at capacity, under capacity, and it's a planning tool. So what you can do is you can plan for the new storm surges that we have and the increase in rainfall in the areas where we have stormwater, infiltrating people's properties. So without that, you're really guessing. I mean, we know, all right, this area floods, but we really have no tool to know how to size that in the upstream portion. And there's other communities that have done this. Let's see here if I can. I wanted to show you something real quick. And this would all be available on ArcGIS after on the city's system, so that if you wanted to see, where you had a stormwater, is that gonna? It's not going to go.
Not in the presentation.
No. All right. Sorry, I'd like to show you that. I'm not going to be able to, though.
Does our existing GIS license, would it cover this other layer, or is this an add-on?
I believe it will.
Oh.
Yep.
And you're doing the same for sewer eventually?
Sewer's done.
Oh, sorry. But sewer, are we planning to upload that to Access as well?
I think it's still, don't they already have it?
I don't know if it's on,
Not available to public.
unless
Right,
they,
that's correct, but I believe it's available to Dave Bolster. Has it. I think, I'm not sure that.
but
Okay.
every year they look to put a little more on the CAI.
I know you can't see it on there, but on here, what ends up happening is in the end, when you do all the things I talked about, you kind of end up with a three-dimensional view. And you can see where the depth of all of the catch basin structures, how they're all tied together, and it's kind of a planning tool.
So, I have a question. Are you aware of the study that the storm impact has on the harbor that Abby did last summer?
I haven't read that.
We haven't seen that. You're talking about the pollution study?
So the pollution study.
The same, I don't think they
That helps with all of that, because what that'll end up doing is, we'll see areas where we need improvement, we're gonna do road work. So then we can look at, if we're undersized in that area, and then we can put in either storage or interceptors or any kind of those kinds of things to deal with pollution.
Well, just for an example.
Yep.
The standard is 104 CFUs, and testing after a major rainstorm at the waterfront restaurant.
Is that coliform forming units, is that, yeah.
At the waterfront restaurant, that raises to 19,800.
Right.
And in other test sites around the harbor, it raises to 4,000, 5,000, 15,000. So, there always seems to be a stormwater issue at the waterfront restaurant parking lot.
I mean, what I've seen, I worked at a wastewater treatment plant also, and not going to say this is what it is for sure, but what you have when you have strong storm surges and stormwater lines is you get a scouring effect, or you're pulling in pollution that's just laying on the surface, could be dog waste or whatever, there's all kinds of different types of stormwater pollution. And it ends up getting pulled into the system when you have, a lot of rain because of the velocity of the water, and that's the result of that. So that's probably a result of undersizing and not putting in treatment kind of mechanisms in place in the stormwater system.
And we do get a lot of stormwater infiltration into the sewer system, which can overload that, and, yeah.
To the previous slide, that you did show the video, by the way, it's just everybody understands. When we talk about redoing a road, this isn't about the paving of the sidewalk and the road. It's about the drainage. That's one. Two, to the point that Mark is making and Dave, because of the increase, MDOT's had this big time, by the way, that's why all these projects go crazy in dollars, because they're running different standards for the amount of rainfall, and they go by 100-year storm, and that's making drainage, a lot bigger than it was before. And so, to your point, Mark, we probably have drainage that's way undersized. So when you get these huge events of water, the system can't handle it, you're going to have overflow, and that's going to come in and out.
We're trying to be proactive with it. But this is the first step in doing that and understanding it all. I mean, it's a big, big issue, but, the select board, the people in town, they're all on board, I believe, with making this, staying ahead of the curve and implementing these kind of things to eliminate pollution. I hear that over and over again just about everywhere I go and talk with people, so.
Are our stormwater sewers and our sanitary sewers segregated?
They are, and I'm not saying that's 100% because no one can really say that, but, you guys have done a great job doing that already, and every once in a while you find an outlier, and when we find that, we actually would take the excavator and probably help Dave replace it. And
They're designed to be separate.
Yes.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're always separate.
We're not perfect.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so this next CIP is something, I think maybe, know if everyone's familiar with the Knox Mill parking lot right off of Walton Street when you drive in. So this is kind of a dangerous situation. That boardwalk is failing. It's all rotted. I looked it over, and we actually cleaned the parking lot up and got rid of a lot of the brush this summer, and kind of tidied it up. It was the first attempt at that. It had kind of gotten overgrown. And so we've kind of made an attempt at keeping people from getting on this boardwalk currently because it's dangerous. But what we're proposing in the CIP is is it in the CIP, but we're proposing to replace this portion of the fence, and we're not going to redo the boardwalk because that would be huge cost to redo that boardwalk. So I looked it over. What you have on the left side of that hand railing right there is a retaining wall, and then that decking is just overhanging the slope. So there's really nothing underneath it right now. So we would core out a portion of the retaining wall, and we'd put in proposing a new fence, which would look like that, which is a replica of what's there, but it's vinyl. Probably would last longer and it'll look really the same. And then I was going to put curb stops to the left of it to keep people from backing into it, which would be pinned to the ground. That saves a pretty significant amount of cost. So this one right here would be $13,899 to do that, not including the curb stops, which is another $2,500. And then the same thing goes for the Knowlton Street by the Riverwalk. So if you've gone by there, this entire area is rotten. And these are just the worst sections that I'm proposing to replace. The rest we want to paint and preserve.
What about the stairs that are in the middle of the?
We took those out.
Okay.
We removed them because you can kind of walk down there without those stairs.
Okay.
Yeah. We didn't take all the stairs out. The ones we left are, in okay shape. Probably need to be, looked at again. But in the Knox Mill section, there's one set of stairs that are still in okay shape, like I said. So this part of the repairs of this part of the fence would be $10,250. $128, and no curb stops would be proposed there because it's elevated and people couldn't drive into it. So, and then we want to, like I said earlier, repaint the rest of it that exists. This would only replace the worst part. But both of these areas are up against a slope, and it's kind of dangerous. Okay, so this is a project that the downtown design team has been working on for quite some time, and you'll find that in another section of the CIP. And what they're proposing to do is we would be putting a concrete portion going down halfway with under drain and tying into the 36-inch drain line the state's putting in. And they would be kind of taking down that hump that exists off of Route 1 so that there's kind of a more of a gradual transition from the new crosswalk that they're putting in on the other side. And that would make things a little safer for people to walk down and kind of pretty it up. And also they're proposing to install 3 of the LED light posts that you see on downtown. And I think that's pretty much it. And then MDOT is going to pick up the pavement on the last portion. So I guess the benefit of all this is that we're kind of taking advantage of the road or the alleyway here being all torn up, and then they're assisting with putting in the conduit from the lighting up above, because that would require a different kind of base to pull the electrical off of. And they're going to be putting in all the gravel and basically prepping it for us. And then we would come in and we would probably work with the contractors that were already there to put in the light pole bases, the lights, and the textured concrete walkway up above.
You're going to still end up with bollards or planters in that walkway? Because I've been there when people have driven up it, and it's quite interesting to see.
I think that if you can see the design right here, I think they plan on putting, like you said, some kind of planters or something, so that deliveries can make it partially the way up and then stop.
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know, they haven't picked that detail yet.
Well, I guess my concern was the gradual curb cut might make it even more inviting.
Oh, to go down it, you mean?
Sure. Yeah.
There'll be a crosswalk at that point. There'll be a crosswalk right there.
That could be, I think the big challenge here is MDOT and doing the stop and go to CDOT project. They haven't had good track record of getting any projects bid within 1/10 of their budget.
Yeah.
That could pull it up, but this is what we would, the great thing is they said they'll cooperate with us and help us the process, reducing our cost. Yeah. But I think it's good points. You don't want to make it look like a street.
Yeah, I've been there for a couple times when cars have driven up it and down it. So
The upper section will be, I think, only 10 feet wide. It'll be narrowed right up.
Yeah.
So, and there'll be a curb running alongside of it.
Yeah.
And then stone, so.
Dave, didn't they talk about not stepping that a little bit, or is that gray zone a ramp?
That's an ADA, well, not an ADA ramp. That's a pedestrian kind of gradual slope from the crosswalk, kind of taking that hump that you see at the beginning of the alleyway down. Because right now it kind of goes like this.
It will also have a different kind of a finish. It won't look like a road like it does now.
Yeah.
And that should make a difference. And so that people actually realize that it's a good way to walk to the harbor.
That's the objective. So they don't walk down the street. So now we're getting into the complete street portion. So this is the planning and engineering through CIP that we talked about. And there's several projects in here that we're getting into some detail and doing complete rebuilds. And the main objective is walkability and bike lanes. So one of them is Bayview, looking at Bayview and improving the stormwater drainage, as well as resurfacing the road, but also extending the sidewalk and redoing the sidewalk. Mechanic and Free Street, as I told you before, we're doing a light capital paving on this. This will be a complete rebuild. And this will be, redoing the sidewalk, redoing the road, completely redoing the sewer line underneath and all of that work associated with the infrastructure underneath, as well as the water line. There'll also be, the concept is a bike lane going all the way down to Elm Street, which would kind of tie into the last one down on there, which is the Hosmer Pond Road project, which would pick up a bike lane from Simonton, basically Main Street, all the way to the Snow Bowl. And we've heard that as being something that there's a lot of desire for. And I'm working on an MPI, which is a grant through the state. It's called the Municipal Partnership Agreement Initiative. And they give you $500 each, $500 won't get you far, $500,000. And if you straddle like 2 years, you can kind of take advantage of the end of 1 year and the beginning of another. And you can put those, potentially that, if you get the money towards this project. I think this, I'm hearing over and over again, is something the town really would like to see. So I'm kind of excited about working on that. And then the last one is the Rawson and Ames Terrace. That's widening out the road, putting in a shoulder in there so people can walk safely along that stretch of road.
Taking into consideration what they do where Ames Terrace comes out on Washington Street, that's pretty dangerous. There's no good sight lines there, kids walking on the sidewalk.
Yeah, and people are going to want to cross the road to get, to the store and stuff.
Well, they don't have Rawson Avenue to come out.
Right.
And now we created a monster.
What I would do is I'm working with the engineer. I would personally probably bring some of the DOT engineers down. I was involved in a program with the MDOT, and what they do is they ask you to go to other towns, and what you do is you get a whole group of people that do this for a living, that are public works directors and engineers, and you all stand around and you look at it and come up with a good resolution and a safe way to implement something like that in that location. That's probably how I would approach that. I don't have that all done up yet, but that's a good point. And that would be how I would handle it. That's pretty much, this is just something I kind of want to show you, and it has the potential to be put in from Chestnut to Beacon Street. And it's called an advisory lane. This is showing an advisory bike lane, but there's different variations of this. And the idea is you're not really creating a curb, an elevated curb. You're just creating a safe walking area for pedestrians and bikes. And what ends up happening is the roadway gets kind of shortened up to like 13 feet, and then you'll have either one or two advisory lanes that are 5 feet on each side. And the idea here is you're slowing traffic down, kind of what they're doing on Bayview now. It's really no different than what's happening, but it really gives people a more defined area to walk. Because if you were, I'm sure you guys have been on Bayview, but if you walk down Bayview, and I've sat there and just watched people, and I've talked to them, and what they don't like being on that sidewalk, because the sidewalk's too narrow to walk two abreast, and they really don't like being on the sidewalk because it's kind of close to the overhanging trees and everything, and so they walk down the middle of the road. I mean, and this would kind of lend itself to having a better place for them to walk. I'm not saying it would have to look like this, but this is just an idea and a concept. And what they've done is they've done this in Scarborough with pretty good success. And so, it's something to contemplate and talk about. And I guess when we get to that point, we would have some meetings and some dialogue about this approach.
How does that affect parking along the street?
Well, that's a good point. That's why I said it wouldn't be exactly this. I talked with Audra a little bit about it, and I could see this advisory lane being on one side of the road and being twice as wide, and then have all the parking on the right side, let's say. So now the car has to kind of do the same thing, has to stop and wait, and then if it has room, it can go into the advisory lane and go around, but it gives a nice wide walking lane on Bayview.
You keep saying Bayview and Chestnut, which...
Bayview. Sorry, not Chestnut.
Talking Bayview, okay.
Bayview. Did I say Chestnut?
Yeah, because Chestnut's a nightmare. Nobody uses the sidewalks on there. I used to live there. They walk right down the middle of the road.
Well, it's the same kind of idea. The one thing you have to keep in mind with this is you have to have low speed and a clear line of sight, so you really can't do it where it's curvy and you can't see over a hill or something. But I'd like to go and maybe bring some people down in Scarborough sometime and look at how they did it, just to see how people like it and see how it works. But you have to look at all these ways of doing things, and because there's not going to be one thing that's going to fix all our problems in town for walkability. It's going to be a combination of things: widening of a shoulder, putting in an esplanade, maybe doing an advisory lane, and then, you'd be able to slowly interconnect all of the walking, the sidewalks and the roads in town so that it's a more walkable community. And then last, I think this is the last one, I hope so. So this is another kind of project I'm kind of helping with. So we're going to be replacing the gutters on the building at the Opera House, and then we're going to take an approach of repointing one side of the building at a time. Right now, the building is in some serious problems with leakage, and we've brought some people, Knowles Industrial Service, over to help us kind of look at that, and we're proposing to repoint this side of the building this year and replace all the gutters and potentially put in some heating units to keep the gutters from freezing so that we don't have ice falling on people. So that's kind of what is planned for this year. And I want to thank you, and there's a picture of the crew, and I want to say thank you to Rick Seibel for welcoming me and helping me with this transition, and the department heads I've been working with really made this easy for me, and I appreciate your time. So if you have any questions, I hope I didn't drag this out too much, but there was a lot to cover, and I don't think you would have probably got a full appreciation without the pictures.
No, I agree with that, thank you.
You're welcome.
So some of the projects, like the DOT sidewalk originally that was coming from to Hannaford and stuff, are all those just canceled and we're going to try to take it on ourselves?
No, so the Maritime Farms project, the Quarry Hill to Maritime Farms sidewalk project, they're going to rebid that with the 105 sidewalk from Matthew John to Short Tail Point, and then we'll see what we get back from.
Days in the DOT?
Yes. Okay. Yep.
But the Park Street one to Stop and Go, is that funny, weird, narrow sidewalk?
Yeah.
That's a project, that was one of the projects that was mentioned there as a future.
Yes, yep. So there still needs to be quite a bit of planning that's done before we even get to a point where we can, bid that out and get a price on it.
Good, John?
Dave, how do you anticipate your bidding numbers coming up? Everybody's been coming in way over.
Well, I've already bid my 2 major projects for this year, and that's my approach to, I'm trying to take something that's already been bid and I got good numbers on, and using the unit price for Pearl Street. And if they accept those unit prices, I think we'll be in good shape. I'd rather do that than test the market.
So the 2 bids that you got received are close to what you...
Yeah, we have money to cover those. I mean, one of them, the Mechanic Street lot was a little bit over, and the Norwood Ave was a little bit over, which I'm going to be using some of the operational carry forward money to make up that difference. So we have the funds for that. And then there was funds set aside for Pearl Street also. And like I said, if you back calculate the cost of doing Pearl Street, we have the funding for that also. So that's a safe bet as opposed to trying to bid it out. So we're meeting next week to discuss that, and I'm hopeful the contractor will accept those terms.
When you say Pearl Street, you're just talking John Street to Park Street?
That's correct, yep. And more of that needs to be done, but you can only, one of the limiting factors is our time right now. I mean, we've got a big workload that you just saw, and what I'll do next year is I'll go through this same thing with you and tell you what I accomplished.
So that was going to be like the walking lane would be instead of like the sidewalk, or when the sidewalk ends, kind of, that's on Pearl Street?
Well, what that's What's the question again?
That walking lane with a possible mowable area, that,
The advisory lane.
not the advisory lane.
The Esplanade tracks on
I
Grove
mean,
Street.
don't give, I mean, we can do the same project without an esplanade. We can just, put the sidewalk along the side of the road. The idea is, if you put an esplanade, you create a barrier between the motorist and the pedestrian, without creating an elevated walkway.
So that would be instead of, like, you take out what's there for a sidewalk.
That's
It's
correct.
in terrible shape and just replace
We
it.
would take the whole thing out, and it would be all new, and then there'd be some trees kind of through the esplanade, if we took that approach.
Now, is this going to go beyond where the sidewalk goes now on Pearl Street and go all the way to John? Because the sidewalk ends before you get to John Street.
Yes, it would
It
go
would go all the way to John, that's correct, yeah.
Now, do we have the right-of-ways through there?
Well, that's part of what we've done. We've already looked at the survey, and we do have the right-of-way through there. But we really want to talk with the residents before we just go and do something like that. We have right-of-way there, though. We have quite a bit of room on both sides of that road right now.
Any other questions? Is there something back there?
Sorry.
Don't do it again.
Any other questions? There was before we get to motions, there was discussion about raising the line on radios, 1001-2025, from 1,200 to 2,400, which I believe, if I did the math right, would raise the end to $1,200,300. Did you do that math, just so we know?
I'm actually doing it right now.
Okay. So
It's adding
it was-
1,200, right?
Oh, I added 2,400, not
Yeah.
1,200. Yeah, 1,200.
99.1, yeah.
So I did that
So
wrong.
you want to make it at 2,400
It was, right, make that line 2,400.
under radio?
99.1.
So the total would be 1,199,100.
So
Okay.
moved.
Moved and seconded. Any other conversations? No? All in favor? Anybody opposed? I think I saw everybody, so that passes 1,199,100. Streets, highways, bridges, and sidewalks. On page 22, any questions on that or discussion?
I move the town manager's 7,000.
I actually have a question.
Question?
I have a question. You mentioned that you assessed the roads when you first started. Now, it's obviously, we're coming into spring. So do you, do you do a continual assessment, or is your, are your recommendations based off of your assessment prior to winter?
Our assessment was done August. It was done in August to September, September timeframe, and we try to do them every year because the conditions can change greatly from year to year.
So any roads that would deteriorate over the winter, you might not assess them to August, and in which case they won't be on the budget for the following year.
They would be in the next budget cycle, yes, that's correct.
In the equipment rental line, we've included the excavator rental. So I guess when we look at capital, we've kind of double dipped twice on it a little bit.
Yeah, you removed the cost of
I
that.
took it out.
The excavator rental is taken out?
Yeah, so if we
Okay.
don't
35 to
approve the
25.
excavator, then we would have to increase that line item back to what it was.
Thank you.
10 grand.
Yeah.
It dropped 10,000.
Thank you. Yep.
And actually, it was
I was looking at the
4,500,
note.
not 7,000.
The note seemed to reference it was still in.
So would you like to amend your motion?
That was my amended motion.
Was for
To
the
approve the town manager's
405.
request of 405. I got anxious, got a page out of it.
I'll second that.
Second, okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? No one opposed, so
You can go to that
405,000.
page, Sean. Yeah, that's right.
Now, page 23, parking lots and tree program. Did we talk about tree program? We talked about parking lots.
Parking lots are basically a set contract deal. We can't change this number anyways, can we?
Not the lease.
Not the lease part.
No, the lease, that is the lease purchase for the Knox and Milton Street lots, and there's a offsetting TIF revenue that's used to pay for that lease.
The complete amount?
Yes, yeah.
Does everybody understand that with the TIF and what that does? Okay.
So I motion for the 70,000.
Motion for the 70,000.
Second.
Seconded. Further discussion?
What's the term of the TIF? When does it expire?
So the downtown TIF, I believe that's a 20-year TIF, and, I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly when.
Okay.
I think it's,
Like 5, 6 years old now, something like that.
Yeah.
So it still has a long ways to
Oh, yeah.
mature. Okay, thank you.
Mark, did you have a question?
No.
Comment?
I was voting.
You were voting. Well, Mark's all for it. Good. Okay, so all in favor, 70,000. No one opposed, 70,000. Tree program, tree maintenance, shade tree planting. Questions? Mark?
On this, is any of this for brown-tail moth? Has that been figured into any of this? Or is that someplace else in the budget?
that is not in this part of the budget. So that would be theoretically, it could be the tree conservation reserve that we talked about.
Okay.
But it would not, this only covers sort of the, maintenance pruning when we need to take a tree down because there's an emergency situation, and some funds to plant trees that we match with the garden club.
Emergency pruning couldn't include some of the trimming out brown-tail moths out of this?
No, because this is, I
This is just
mean,
barely enough to.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Do we currently turn anyone away that applies to the shade tree program?
Usually we don't have enough participation that that's something that we need to worry about from year to year.
Okay. I mean, I think that's a huge bang for the buck as far as your town beautification, and maybe something we even need to market more. I'd love to budget more and market more. I'd love to have a lot of people wanting to put trees in. And the nice thing too is most of these trees, correct me if I'm wrong, end up on their property and become their maintenance responsibility.
Well, we had two, but they're both still in the right of way.
Yes,
Okay.
sometimes it's the right of way, sometimes it's that kind of
Fuzzy area.
side of it.
Motion for 37,000.
Second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Vote, all in favor of 37,000? Okay, no one opposed, so 37,000. Capital improvements?
I
Or no?
would say let's wait until the very end because there's a few little things as well from other departments.
Right, I just didn't know if you wanted to go over anything that he just went over, or just consider that gone over.
Yeah, let's consider it, and we'll go
Let's consider
back
it
through at the end and refresh.
Okay.
Did we table some things from the last meeting?
It was all capital.
It was just capital?
Yeah.
Presentation from Dave.
So we need a motion to adjourn. You want to go home? John's spending the night. Second, all in favor? Thank you.
We need an easy.